Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Manitou Springs City Council for May 17th, 2022. And we will start as always with a Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Would the city clerk please call the roll?
City council members, Judith Chandler,
Present.
Julie Wolf,
Here.
Natalie Johnson,
Here.
Nancy Fortune,
Present.
Michelle Weatherholt,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem John Shada,
Here.
and Mayor John Graham.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we've got a full house, which is good because we have a full agenda. Council, I think you've had an opportunity to review the tonight's agenda. I would ask for a motion to approve.
I move approval.
We motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Chandler. All in favor, say aye. Or Judy, do you want us to vote on them electronically or by voice?
If you want to just skip this one for the electronic and I'll have it queued up for the others.
Okay, great. I don't think it's controversial. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, thank you. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, next item of business is public comment on non-agenda items. This is a time during the meeting when any member of the public can speak to a non-agenda. Typically, we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. Try not to be too repetitious. Tonight, we do have the Girl of the West here and representatives of the Pike Peak Range Ride and the Pike Peak Bust Rodeo. They had asked for a more lengthy presentation. I asked them to appear at this time and to limit themselves to 5 minutes. So they will have a little bit longer opportunity than usual, but it has been, we've negotiated a time. So if the Girl of the West would like to take the floor now. Yeah, please. Yeah, come to the microphone. You'll need to press the button there. You'll see the green light come on. You'll need to be about 3 inches from the microphone. It's pretty sensitive.
My name is Corliss Palmer. I'm a 21-year volunteer for the Pike Peak Bust Rodeo. As such, I'm the director of the Girl of the West program. The Girl of the West started 100 years ago this year. Her name was Dawn Norris. Her original outfit is down at the Pioneers Museum in Colorado Springs. Our seamstress recreated the exact outfit for this year as a tribute to 100 years. So it's pretty amazing, and she did a really great job down to the last detail. The Girl of the West is a 2-summer commitment. The girl is chosen as an aide during the rodeo to serve as the following year, and then her second year she becomes Girl of the West. The competition consists of horsemanship, interview, speech, and appearance, and that competition will be on July 15th. We also have some rodeo calendars and, calendars, and some Western Heritage calendars for the whole area, Western events, and some street breakfast stuff. So if you would pass those around town, that would be very helpful. The Girl of the West is Georgia Stramenis. She's the 2022 Girl of the West, is the 20-year-old daughter of George and Jenny of Larkspur. Since age 10, she's been riding all kinds of ranch horse, English, 4-H. She also served as an ambassador of other rodeos. She's currently a junior at the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs, majoring in communications. Her brother's serving in the U.S. Army as an airborne ranger. She rides a paint horse gelding named Rock. Brooke Saltwaddell is a 2022 Age Girl of the West. She's the 19-year-old daughter of Ray Saltwaddell and Rachel Morgan. She grew up doing ranch work, competing in speed and show events under the Western discipline. She's currently working towards a nursing degree at Pikes Peak Community College. She plans to work as a scrub nurse while attending medical school to study neurosurgery. She rides a quarter horse named Duke. Please enjoy the Girls of the West.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Georgia, and I am the Girl of the West.
And I'm Brooke, Aide to Girl of the West.
We serve as the proud ambassadors for the Pike Speaker Bus Rodeo, and we're excited to tell you that the best in pro rodeo are coming to Colorado Springs for the 81st Pike Speaker Bus Rodeo NFR Open, July 13th through the 16th, 2022 at the scenic Norris Penrose Event Center. The inaugural NFR Open, powered by RAM, will be one of the biggest rodeos of the 2022 pro rodeo season, with $1 million in payouts. More than 200 contestants from each of the 12 U.S. circuits, plus Canada, will be competing in bareback riding, steer wrestling, team roping, saddle bronc riding, tie-down roping, breakaway roping, barrel racing, and bull riding, with the semifinals and finals on Saturday evening, July 16th, where the national circuit champions will be crowned.
I want to let you know that the Pike Speaker Bus is a special rodeo to me and my family, and Georgia and her family too. We are so proud of everything that it stands for, our Western heritage, the sport of rodeo, and most especially giving back to our local military and their families. Being part of this rodeo family is important to me. I'm grateful to be out representing this legacy event that brings people together to celebrate all that is good about this country and the growing sport of rodeo, all while honoring the service and sacrifice made by our military and their families.
That is so true, Brooke. And I can also say that without a doubt, you will not want to miss this year's rodeo. Tickets for the 81st Pike Speaker Bus Rodeo are on sale now online at pikespeakerbus.org, and they're selling fast and sellouts are expected. The rodeo runs Wednesday, July 13th through Saturday, July 16th, with evening performances at 6:45 p.m. Wednesday through Saturday evenings and a Saturday matinee at 12:15 p.m. Discounts are available for kids 12 and under, military, first responders, and groups of 20 or more.
There's lots to do before the rodeo begins. Come early, avoid the traffic, and enjoy all of the fun in our fan zone. Gates open at 4 p.m. for evening performances and 10 a.m. for the Saturday matinee. There's a petting zoo, roping demos, mutton busting tryouts, and pony rides. Vendor booths on both sides of the arena offer souvenirs, Western shopping, as well as food and drink. Our local military are represented at each of our performances. Fort Carson on Wednesday evening, Missile Defense and First Responders on Thursday evening, Space Night on Friday evening, United States Air Force Academy at the Saturday matinee, and NORAD US Northcom on Saturday evening. The Pike Speaker Bus has been giving back to our military since 1946.
All of the performances will start with the Pikes Peak Range Rider Pivots and the Pikes Peak Rangerettes drill teams, followed by the Fort Carson Mounted Color Guard. Then it's top rodeo action. Plus, there's fan favorite mutton bustin'. Everybody loves to watch these fierce kiddos give it their all in hopes of winning a trophy and a medal. After the rodeo, stick around for autographs from the contestants, the Rangerettes, and the Girls of the West. That's us. Then head on over to the Coors Roadhouse Saloon for live music, dancing, and a frosty Coors.
We hope you'll wave to us when you see our awesome pink Perkins Ram truck as we head out to represent our rodeo at businesses, military installations, and community events. Speaking of community events, I hope you'll plan to join us bright and early on June 15th for the annual Colorado Springs Western Street Breakfast and official send-off for our Pikes Peak Range Riders annual ride. Enjoy the $5 breakfast prepared and served by active duty military volunteers.
Ladies, can you sum up, please? You're over 5 minutes.
I'm counting on seeing each of you at this year's rodeo. The dates again are Wednesday, July 13th through Saturday, July 16th. Save time by purchasing your tickets online. You can find all of this information and much more about our rodeo at our website, pikespeakerbus.org. So get ready for the best in professional rodeo at the 81st Pike Speaker Bus Rodeo NFR Open, July 13th through the 16th at the Norris Penrose Event Center in Colorado Springs. See you there.
Great, thank you very much. All right. Very good. Do we have anyone else who would like to speak about it on a non-agenda item this evening? Judy, did anyone else? Okay. Apparently not. Okay, let's push on. Okay, next item is our consent calendar. We have 4 items tonight. Approval of the May 3rd, 2022 regular meeting minutes. The second item is warrants and check register for April 2022. Third, approved contract for street improvements on Duncan Avenue, Mesa Avenue, and Michigan Avenue, milling and paving of all 3 streets to include berms where needed. 4, reappointment of Nancy Wilson as a regular member of the Open Space Advisory Committee. If any member of council wishes to remove an item for separate consideration, that'd be fine. But if not, I would ask for a motion to move and accept the consent calendar.
I move to approve the consent calendar as written.
Second.
Thank you. Yeah, motion and a second. Judy, do you want us to vote electronically? Oh, there we do. Okay, so we have our cues. Please vote.
Unanimous vote, 7-0.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you. So the consent calendar is approved. Next item is presentation. It's proclamation number 0922, the 62nd National Public Works Week proclamations for the week of May 15th to 21st. And Judith, I believe you're going to read that one?
I am privileged to present proclamation number 0922, 62nd Annual National Public Works Week, May 15th through May 21st, 2022. Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of the city of Manitou Springs, and whereas these infrastructure, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals who are engineers, managers, and employees at all levels of government and the private sector, who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, and solid waste systems, public buildings and other structures and facilities essential to our citizens. And whereas it is in the public interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and children in the city of Manitou Springs to gain knowledge of and to maintain an ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the year 2022 marks the 62nd Annual National Public Works Week, sponsored by the American Public Works Association and Canadian Public Works Association, now, therefore, John G. Graham, Mayor of the City of Manitou Springs, hereby designates the week of May 15th through May 21st, 2022 as National Public Works Week and urges all citizens to pay tribute to our public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contributions they make to protecting our national health, safety, and quality of life. Adopted this 17th day of May 2022 in the city of Manitou Springs, El Paso County, Colorado. And we do have our Public Works Director in the audience, so kudos to all Public Works employees in the audience.
Right. Thank you for reading that, Judith. And yeah, Jeff, if you would accept our appreciation and if pass it back to your crew, that the city, both City Council and the community at large, we appreciate the efforts you make. So when we're warming our beds on a February night and there's a water main break, we appreciate you guys being out there fixing it for us. Thank you. Next item, proclamation number 1022, International Human Resources Day. That's May 20th. Nancy?
City of Manitou Springs proclamation number 1022, Annual International Human Resources Day, May 20th. Whereas the Office of Human Resource Professional is a time-honored and vital part of local government and exists throughout the world, and whereas the Office of Human Resources is a global profession of vital personal functions across all industries, and whereas the Office of Human Resources provides the professional link between management and personnel, and whereas professional human resources assures processes based upon organizational policies and are mindful of the need for neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all, and whereas the Professional Human Resource Director focuses on managing policies and procedures to ensure compliance with all local, state, and federal employment regulations, and whereas professional human resources strive to improve the organization's administrative functions by participating in educational programs, seminars, workshops, and local, state, and national Society of Human Resource Management professional organizations, and whereas it is most appropriate that we recognize the accomplishments of the Professional Human Resources Director, thank you, Kelly. Now, therefore, John G. Graham, Mayor of the City of Manitou Springs, Colorado, does recognize the day of May 20th as International Human Resources Day and further extends appreciation to our Human Resource Director, Kelly Padilla, and to all Professional Human Resources Director for the vital services they perform and their exemplary dedication to the communities they represent. Adopted the 17th day of May 2022 in the City of Manitou Springs, El Paso County, Colorado.
Great, thank you, Nancy. And Kelly, thank you for your efforts in making, giving the city a better culture of responsiveness in terms of human resources. I think we're making progress. I think as council looks back where we were a couple years ago, we see some major improvements, so we're pleased at that. So thank you very much. Council, any other comments for either Kelly or Jeff? Okay, great. Let's go ahead and move on then. Next item is review and discussion of culture survey. This goes back to request from City Council to take a look at the work culture of our city staff. So, all right, and Mr. Longmore, is it?
Very close, yes. Longmire.
Longmire, okay, I'm sorry. Okay.
No, that's okay.
Okay, Bob, you got the floor.
Thank you. It's good to be back with you. I think the last time I was here, we were talking about the classification and compensation study, which was a little bit of a heavy lift and had some asks of council afterwards. I think today is a little bit easier. We're looking at essentially our report card, kind of how we did on that, and the overall culture and employee satisfaction from the employees. So don't have any direct action items today. This is more of an informative on what the study found, and we'll just kind of be talking about some of the employee sentiment around compensation, environment, culture, satisfaction, some of the values, as well as some closing thoughts. Just maybe start a little bit zoomed out, nationwide context of a little bit where we find ourselves nowadays. I won't spend too much time on this. I think it's pretty well covered. Everybody's talking about cost of living, inflation, gas prices, housing, rent. Those conversations are taking place at a national basis and are ever present in the minds of employees, to the point where Google released their employee satisfaction survey just 3 weeks ago now. And 50% of Google employees were dissatisfied with their pay and said their employer is behind market. And I thought that was a little bit of a telling national trend that even if you are Google, it is difficult to score above a 50% employee satisfaction in today's environment. That was down 8 points for them, and their ranking of their CEO fell by a decent amount. So there's just a sentiment among employees where we're having a difficult time keeping up with cost of living, inflation. Those factors are on everybody's minds. So that's kind of the national environment that we find ourselves in. A lot of firms are struggling with that return to work, employee satisfaction. A lot of those things are happening nationally that we're kind of seeing. Just a little bit setting the stage. The comments I would make on this editorially maybe is the city of Manitou outscored Google on the employee satisfaction towards compensation and towards leadership. So just anecdotally, that's where it fell against Google. So kind of right off the bat, we asked employees, hey, overall, how do you rate the pay of the organization? Where do you fall from one of the worst to one of the best? So there we had about 65% saying we're average or above average on our pay. another 27 below average, and then we have some of those employees who are coming in at, we are one of the worst. Right? And you always get that mix. There's always going to be kind of that, if you imagine a bell curve on any responses that we get, a lot of what we'll see tonight in these responses is, if you picture a bell curve, where does the peak of that curve fall? Are we trending more towards the good, or are we trending more towards the bad? You're always going to get responses on either end of that bell curve, but we want to see where the peak of that is and where we're trending along those sides. So next thing is we asked is about the classification and compensation. So if you remember, we just completed that study. We went through, we updated job titles, job descriptions, salary ranges, and when we start to go through and ask employees questions about their satisfaction, about their performance, about their classification, we're seeing, again, a lot of scores towards the good. So we see almost an even distribution on employees who are high performing receive better increases than employees who don't. We see things where we score really well for my classification and job title is correctly reflective of my duties. We see that the vast majority of our employees agree, tend to agree, strongly agree, are in that column. The one item of note here that stuck out to me that I thought I would just note, and we'll come back to it later, is we had a lot of employees who seemed to have confusion around a clear communicated policy about how the city should relate in relationship to market. That makes sense, as there's not an established, clear council policy that says the city of Manitou shall pay X percentage in relationship to market, right? So there's not a policy like that in existence. So it makes sense to me that the employees were saying, I don't know about any such policy. So that's what we noticed on that slide. Here was, I think, maybe a high level kind of takeaway. One of the things that I think we'll see in more detail in some of the following slides is when you start to ask employees, what are the aspects you find most beneficial about your organization? We're going to see culture of the city, satisfaction in the work they perform, and their relationship with their supervisor. So those three things score very high every time we have that conversation. When we ask them about those things in a different fashion, or we rephrase a question in around those three things, we score very high. We also have a pretty good response on compensation and kind of work-life balance. So working environment, a couple questions right off the top around culture, safety. Again, really good responses there. I was very encouraged to see that most of the employees believe that we have a safe work environment, that we provide them the city with the equipment they need to do the job, that we have a culture of safety. I think the one thing I would note here, just as an outside observer, I think your culture and safety is above most organizations. All employees have a stop work card that they can pull out, and without retribution, without retaliation, they can say, this is an unsafe environment, we need to pause, we need to take a time out, we need to reevaluate this situation. That's a policy that not a lot of organizations have on the books, and I think it's a really healthy and positive thing that exists here at the city. It doesn't exist in a lot of other places. You'll also see kind of a culture around asking questions, that they can raise their hand, they can say, I need assistance, I need help, I have this question, I don't know this answer, and all of them agree or tend to agree or strongly agree that the culture of the city allows them to do that. So again, when we talk about the environment that this work is being performed in, I would rate this very healthy and a strong response from the employees. So very similar things. This is I don't want to rush through this, but I don't want it to also sound really repetitive. When we start to talk about the culture and we ask employees similar questions in a little bit of a different phrasing, when we say there's a positive and encouraging culture promoted by the employees, more than half tend to agree, strongly agree. We're taking this bell curve of responses. We always got a handful of people on this side that are just, when we got the questionnaires back, it was negative, it was ones on everything down the left-hand side. You're always going to get a percentage of employees who do that. But the bell curve here is really tilted strongly to the good, in my opinion. You know, there's a positive, encouraging culture promoted by employees, supervisors, city management. Again, the city values hard work, knowledge, experience. We're tilting towards the good in all of these categories that I think is really, honestly, kind of refreshing. We do many of these surveys a year. This is one of the best that we have seen in a while from employee satisfaction, on culture, on compensation, on satisfaction. When you look at these scores here for the satisfaction the employees have around the work that they perform, this is where everything ranked the highest. Questions like, the work I perform gives me satisfaction and provides meaning in my life. You know, 70% agree, strongly agree, tend to agree. Like, we're seeing very meaningful work that's performed. Everybody but 3 people said the city would be worse off if I left. So almost every employee believes they are bringing value to the city. They are improving the lives of residents, and the work that they are doing matters. This was one of the strongest tilts. Again, that curve, we're tilted to the good here. The employees believe in the work that they're doing. They don't feel that the work doesn't have value or isn't providing meaning. Yes?
Can you help me with which line shows the 70%?
Yes, I'm sorry. When you add up the columns, I have a raw count here instead of totals, but when you say agree, tend to agree, strongly agree, the 3 middle columns moving to the right. So we have strongly disagree, tend to agree, agree, hard to agree, and strongly agree, if that makes sense.
I don't have those. I have hard to decide.
Oh,
Are
I'm
you
sorry,
including
that's...
You're including hard to decide as a positive? Is that what's happening?
That is mislabeled on the PowerPoint. But yes, I would be including that middle column there. So we have tend to agree, strongly disagree, strongly agree, my apologies. But yes, those columns towards the right-hand side are the ones that have the positive, ones on the left-hand side more towards the negative of the side. City values, here again we have where we start to see some of the comments around compensation that we saw earlier in the presentation. This is an area where we scored a little bit lower, but again, still strongly in my opinion. You know, questions like the salary and benefits I receive make me feel valued. Here's where we saw some things where it's like employees tend to disagree. The employees who agree with that statement agree that my salary and benefits make me feel valued. Twice as many people agree with that statement as disagree with that statement. So we're still, again, tending towards the good, but not quite as strong as we saw around things like the satisfaction we have in the work performed. So as we're going through this, you can just kind of see supervisors score very highly. Employees provide very strong feedback towards their supervisors, towards their coworkers, and even towards the term city management. Again, we see positive input, positive responses there, even towards city residents in those responses. So we tried to be as creative as we could be in asking employees those questions in a bunch of different formats, in a bunch of different ways, getting feedback on how do you view and value your salary and your benefits. We tended towards the good there. We scored high, in my opinion. You can always score higher, but even if you're Google, you get a 50-50 on that one, and we did better than that. I think there's maybe some final thoughts or some take-homes here. You know, I think the employees may benefit if council wants to go down this path in the future towards some sort of established policy that says we want to pay at market rate. You know, communicating that out towards employees. We want to be employer of choice. We want to be at market. A policy like that could alleviate some of the confusion around that. I'd also say I wanted to note that Stop Work Authority, I think, is a really helpful and valuable program every employees are trained on at time of hire and once a year. So I think that recurring training is coming up again. So that gives me a little bit of peace around those employees who feel around safety in some of those cultures. And then again, we can always go above and beyond to say we can create a way for employees to feel valued and rewarded by city management. We can always go above and beyond with some programs around that. If there's areas we want to boost those scores or provide ways for employees to see rewards or programs or incentives from city management or council, there's things we can do if we want to move those scores higher in the future. So that's all I had. Kind of prepared. Any questions on that?
Great. Yes, council, this again, of course, was something the council had asked for, so this is our opportunity to dig down a little deeper. Judith?
Thank you. So the middle column caught my eye, the hard to decide, when I was reviewing this several days ago. So if that is a mistake on all of these slides, what was the question labeled on the actual questionnaire, and what should it be labeled?
So on the actual questionnaire, there's 5 sections, and I believe 3 of them have hard to decide, and 3 of them have agree. I would have to go back and check on that. So because the language for some of those is different in different sections on the questionnaire itself. So I would have to go back and verify that.
I would like to have that information, and I'd like
sure.
for council to have that information, because a lot of people fell in that middle of the bell curve, and I was very curious as to, why an employee would find the question difficult and have a difficulty deciding where they were felt at. So to me, it's hard for me to say, wow, this is really skewing toward the positive. I'm not sure that I can extrapolate that from the data as it is presented in this form. So I would
Yes.
appreciate taking a look at
And
that information.
I think the reason why that doesn't come across that way is that mislabel from hard to decide to agree. So let me clear that up and clean up that up so that it's accurate and clear.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes.
Julie?
Thanks. Is it possible to get a breakdown by department?
So we did not have any kind of unique identifiers on the survey to maximize anonymity. So it came with a page that talked about the efforts we were going to go through to anonymize the data. So we didn't have anything that could even remotely tie back to department. So
that
we
makes
can't,
sense.
we can't report on any kind of department level in the organization, any kind of those things, because we really strongly defaulted towards anonymity to try to get employees most comfortable to give us clearest answers.
I understand that. That makes sense. And is there any breakdown by gender?
No.
I would suggest if we hire you again that we have a gender category, just a little check-off thing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other council members? Questions or comments? Natalie?
In this climate, these numbers are really exciting, and obviously we always have work to do, but I feel great looking at this. So thank you for sharing, and here we go. It's good.
Great. Anyone else? Okay, I guess not at this time.
Okay. Thank
Mr.
you.
Longmire, thank you very much, sir. And if you could get us those corrections, that would be appreciated, okay?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Okay, next we have a series of public hearings tonight. The first public hearing in consideration of an application for a new hotel and restaurant liquor license at 720 Manitou Avenue, Colorado Culinary LLC, doing business as Toasted applicant. The City Council acts as the Manitou Springs local liquor licensing authority. And we will first hear from our city clerk, who is also handles the liquor licenses. Judy?
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. So today we have before you a new liquor license, as the mayor just stated. This is for a business that will be called Toasted. And it is, let me jump to my report here. So it did require, paperwork to be filled out, application to be filled out, a petition of needs and desires was completed. The property was posted, and it was, a publication was put out in the newspaper as well. I received no comments from anyone in the public for or against regarding it. And the notification, the petition of support and need did all show support for this particular business. And so it's for a hotel restaurant liquor license. It is specifically allows more than just beer and wine. It also allows cocktails, drinks as well. And there is a requirement to also serve food with it, which my understanding is this business, that is their main goal is the food service. And this is just something to accompany that as well. And so just in review, it appeared to me to be meeting the requirements. It did not have any issues with its location. And we had, the background check came out fine on our owner. So that is my report.
Okay, great, thank you. And I just realized I was remiss in opening the public hearing, so I will officially open the public hearing. So
Mayor?
before we go to the next step, yes,
Can I entertain a question to the city clerk?
certainly, yeah.
So Judy, I just have a few questions about the actual application. I'm sure that the applicant is here, but
Yes.
there were a few things that were left blank. One was question 24 and 25, and I don't know if they apply to the applicant, but they weren't filled out. And also, and I'm on page 4 of 32, the report and approval of local licensing authority, none of that is filled out and it's not signed.
On page 4?
Well, I have, it's 4 of 32 of my packet, but I think it's it's page 5 of
Okay.
the application. So it would be page 4 of the application, items
4 and 25?
actually, 23, 24, 25, they're just blank. So again, I just wanted that to be clarified. And then on page 5, in my packet, that whole section isn't filled out or signed.
Okay, so those 23, 24, those have to do with the manager. This is the owner. So
Okay,
the owner is
So
acting
those
as the
aren't applicable,
manager.
okay, I just want to make
Right.
sure that whether she was the manager as well. And
Right.
then, okay, thank you.
And then the 25 has to do with a related facility, so campus liquor complex, so that didn't apply. That would be if there was another location.
And then on page 5, has that been completed and signed?
That gets completed once it is done with this hearing.
I see, okay, thank you for clarifying
Sure.
that. Thank you, those are my only questions.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other council members have questions for Judy at this time? Okay, thank you, and she'll be back. Okay, thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
Okay, so next we would like to hear from the applicant. And I will mention that after you make your presentation, we'll have a period of public comments, so the public at large will be able to make comments, and the applicant, you'll have a chance to come back and answer any questions that come up during the public comments portion. Okay, you have the floor.
I'm not very good at public speaking. I'm a great chef. but
That's okay.
the
Start with your name and address, and that'll get us going.
My name is Elisa Young, and for the property or my home address?
Both. Both,
My home
please.
address is 7 Deer Path Avenue, and my proposed restaurant is 720 Manitou Avenue.
Great, thanks.
And I've been a trained chef 30 years, and my goal was to always have a place in Manitou Springs. I've been moved up from New Mexico a year and a half ago. I've been coming up here for about 6 years trying to find a place, so when an opportunity presented itself, I was just over the moon. Toasted, the name Toasted is because we're focusing on toast, avocado toast. We'll do a Mediterranean toast. We'll do an almond butter with berries on toast. Lots of specials, arugula, burratas, things on toast. We'll also offer eggs Benedict, some Mediterranean shashuka, brioche French toast on the weekends, where we'd like to offer Bloody Marys and mimosas. We'll have some grab-and-go salads to go for people going on hikes. We'll be doing charcuterie boards to go. Just a lot of fun take-out food that kind of go hand in hand with you know, the outdoors and everything Manitou has to offer. We'll be doing homemade lemonades. We'll have coffees and just a fun family, great food.
Great, thank you. Perhaps it would be efficient now for if any council members have questions you'd like to ask at this point. And again, she will be back after public comment. Okay, Judith?
I have a quick question about the floor plan. I'm uneducated in ADA compliance with regards to restaurants, but I just did notice that there, on your floor plan on the way to the bathroom, it says it's 37 inches wide, but there's steps. I didn't know how many steps. And then the bathroom door is only 2 feet wide. Does that have to be ADA compliant for your restaurant?
My understanding was that because it was a restaurant before it was grandfathered in, and because the public restrooms are right around the corner in that parking.
Yes, I would need direction on if that's adequate for a restaurant.
So I frankly haven't looked at that issue for private businesses. I just don't know the answer to that question. But I would point out that when you're looking at a liquor license, there's sort of considerations that you're looking at that probably aren't relevant to the ADA compliance. If it's not compliant, she'll have to be, somebody could always complain if it's not. She'd have to bring up to the compliance if it's not. But you're looking at whether or not the applicant's of good moral character under the liquor laws, which basically means she doesn't have any serious criminal convictions. And you're also looking at the neighborhood needs and desires of the adult inhabitants. So I think I'd focus on those, and then if there's an ADA compliance issue, she could certainly consult with planning and maybe get that figured out on the side.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else for the applicant right now? Okay, if not, thank you. We'll see you back in a little bit.
Okay.
You can take your seat. Okay, at this time, I'll open up for public comment. Manitou's interpretation of a person, party, and interest is pretty broad. Basically, if you're a Manitou resident, you can make a comment on this. Do we have anyone in the audience who'd like to speak to this? And Judy, were you notified of anyone who? Okay. Well, in that case, we'll end the public comment. We'll bring the applicant back. Does council have any questions for the applicant? We can bring her back if you do, but there wasn't a whole lot of interest there.
Can we
Jill?
go forward and vote?
Well, I would like to give the city another opportunity. I kind of think the city won't have
Oh, sorry.
won't need to make, we'll try to check off all the boxes here. Okay, so I don't think we need to call the applicant back. I don't know if the city has any additional comments. Denise, no? Okay, well then I will close the public hearing and we'll go into deliberation. So we can discuss this, we can call for a motion. Julie?
I move to approve the liquor license application.
Can we have a
I
motion?
second.
Seconded by Michelle. Okay, any further discussion? If not, Judy, would you enable our voting? Okay, please vote.
We have a unanimous vote in favor, 7-0.
Okay, great. So the application is approved. Great. Thank you. Well, you're welcome. Okay. All right. Great. Yeah, Nancy,
I
please.
just wanted to say this looks like an outstanding addition to Manitou, so thanks for bringing it to us.
Okay. Okay, right. Well, we're coming into the height of the tourist season, so we wish you luck. Okay, great. Great, thank you. Okay. Oh, yeah, you can go. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Okay. Next item. Second reading and public hearing of ordinance number 0822, an ordinance amending chapter 17.08, Historic Preservation District of the Municipal Code regarding inclusion of the Hiawatha Gardens property at 10 Old Man's Trail and 487 El Paso Boulevard within the local district boundaries. And we're going to hear from our new city planner, Hannah.
Mayor, can I just jump in for 1 second? I'm sorry. I think
Oh, yes, sir.
typically it's better to open the public hearing and have staff be part of the public hearing as well. So if we're doing a public hearing, I'd open the public hearing and staff could be part of the public hearing comments, and then the public comments can be part of the public as well.
Okay, very good.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I'm learning, Jeff. It's good of you to be patient. Appreciate it. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Mayor Graham. Hannah Van Den Wegen McGuire, the City Planning Director. I'm here in Dillon's Place tonight, but I just want to communicate there's been no changes between first and second reading of this particular item. So I don't have any further presentation unless there's any questions.
Any questions, council? I guess not. Okay. Thank you. And since the city's the applicant, I think we can go ahead and call for public comment. So if there's anyone here who'd like to speak to this, including city staff. Going once, going twice, going three. Okay, it was not controversial on first reading either, so I will close public comment. I don't know that we need, I think we can probably just go ahead with deliberation and discussion, council. I think Natalie and then Julie.
I move approval of ordinance number 0822, an ordinance amending chapter 17.08, Historic Preservation District of the Municipal Code regarding inclusion of the Hiawatha Gardens property at 10 Old Man's Trail and 487 El Paso Boulevard within the local district boundaries.
A second.
Okay, seconded. I'm sorry, who seconded? Judith, okay, thank you. Okay, do we have any, well, I do have a question, and I guess maybe this is for staff. You know, the last vote, this was a 6-1 vote, and I suspect that's probably what's going to happen here pretty quickly. On the other hand, I can also see that the importance now is that if this project going forward has a better chance of getting a grant with the 7-0 vote, I could see where that might be justification. Any thoughts on that?
Thank you, Mayor Graham and members of the City Council. I'm not that familiar with the granting process. However, I have heard anecdotally that a 7-0 vote does show just that much more support as far as grant opportunities, but it wouldn't necessarily deter from opportunity, I should say.
Okay, all right, thank you. It was largely for my benefit. I appreciate it. Thank you. Any further discussion, council? Julie?
I think it would be appropriate for the mayor to support this because there's no benefit in being a 6-1, whereas if the mayor would join us, then we may be able to be more successful with our grant efforts. So I appreciate your raising that issue and just wanted to encourage you to move forward in that direction.
It's very perceptive of you, Julie. Great. Any further discussion? Oh, thank you. Okay, if not, let's vote.
And we have a 7-0 vote in favor.
Okay, somebody needs to go out and get a grant. Thank you. Well, good luck. Good luck on the project. Thank you. Okay, let's see, moving right along. Third item, second reading and public hearing of ordinance 0922, an ordinance of the City of Manitou Springs, Colorado, amending Title 17 of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code to remove the administrative minor amendment process for material change of appearance certification. Anna, welcome back.
Long time no see. Hannah Van Den Wagen McGuire with the City Planning Department. Again, there's been no significant changes or any changes at all of this particular item between first and second reading, but I am available if there are any questions.
Council, any questions? I guess not. Okay, so this does call for second reading, so we'll have a public hearing. So I will open up the floor for public comment. If there's anyone who wants to speak to this. And Judy, had we had any communications? Okay. I will close the public comment. Council, we're in deliberation. Julie?
I move to approve.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Chandler. Any further discussion? If not, let's vote.
Seven to zero in favor.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay. Item H4, second reading and public hearing of ordinance number 1022, an ordinance of the City of Manitou Springs, Colorado, amending Chapter 6.34 of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code concerning restrictions on open fires and open burning. And of course, we discussed this topic in some detail last week at the work session.
Mayor,
Denise? Yeah.
Keith is supposed to be here. I don't know if there was a fire or something, so could we move this back if that's okay with council? And I don't know how we can do that since we approved the agenda, but, or to give me 10 minutes to find.
Yeah, I mean, if council wants to have comment, otherwise I could just tell council what was changed based on council's comment at the last meeting. Whatever you prefer.
Yeah, let's go forward.
You want to, if there's no objection, we go ahead and have Mr. Parker bring us up to date on this.
Yeah, we can always table it until he's available later if we have more questions that are substantive in nature. But you'll recall at the last meeting there was some discussion about allowing smoking. So I'm going to go, if you have it in front of you, I'll go down to section 6.34.060, which is the prohibited activities during a stage 1 fire restriction. And basically, it says, upon declaration of a stage 1 fire restriction, the following restrictions apply. And then what was basically asked of us was to change subsection 2, where it used to read, outdoor smoking of any tobacco product or similar material in cigarettes, cigars, or pipes is prohibited. And then we took out the smoking in enclosed buildings or structures and along Manitou Avenue is permitted, because we just thought that was kind of redundant language. It's already covered in that first sentence. And then we had discarding lighted cigarettes, cigars, or pipe tobacco products outdoors was added, is also prohibited. So I think there's some concern about discarding them inside in a approved receptacle. So that's the only change that was made to that section, and then exactly the same changes were made into the stage 2 fire ban provisions as well. I think that was all that council had directed at the last meeting.
Okay, thank you. Nancy?
I suspect Council Wolf is going to say the same thing. That's not what I thought, that's not the change I thought we had made. I thought the change we had made was that there'd be no smoking, that smoking would only be allowed in enclosed buildings or vehicles. And this implies that smoking is allowed on Manitou Avenue, which I thought we had taken out. So I'm confused.
And that is my understanding as well. At the last meeting, my notes state that we were to eliminate in both stage 1 and stage 2 bans, number 2, along along Manitou Avenue. So indoor smoking is permitted in cars, but not outdoors on the avenue, was my understanding, both stage 1 and 2.
Okay, I must have gotten that wrong. I reviewed it with the fire chief too. I think maybe we must have misunderstood. So you're looking to basically have smoking along Manitou Avenue?
Is
being
prohibited,
Prohibited. Okay, so,
outdoors.
okay, so this is actually already, the first sentence does that. So outdoor smoking of any tobacco product or similar material is prohibited, basically. And you have to put in Manitou Avenue, because you could put in every street if you wanted to. It basically covers outdoor smoking anywhere.
Julie, did you have
I don't-
something to add?
Yeah, that, I was fine with the change. I thought it was consistent. I thought we meant to prohibit outdoor smoking, period, as well as outdoor discarding of cigarettes, et cetera, as opposed to making special exceptions for Manitou Avenue. But my comment was a little different, more of a question, just to double check. But you know how we're not allowed to smoke indoors under state law, I think it is, in certain commercial buildings? I'm assuming the way this sentence is worded, it means within the parameters of
Yeah.
federal and state law.
Right, this wouldn't change any other prohibitions.
Oh, that was my only concern, but,
So
no,
I
I think this is consistent, though, isn't it? Did we decide that you could smoke in your car? Because there was discussion about Natalie's employee not having a car to smoke in, one of the smokers, and that you can't be smoking outdoors. So if I'm on my outdoor deck and I flick a cigarette out and start a fire in my backyard, that's just as dangerous as on Manitou Ave. So I thought we wanted to prohibit it citywide when we're in these various stages.
Yeah, my confusion is just where it says smoking in enclosed buildings or structures and along Manitou Avenue is permitted.
Oh, goodness, Nancy, you're absolutely right.
Nancy?
We just need to
what-
eliminate that entire second
Oh,
sentence of paragraph 2.
That is gone. Oh, is the version that you have not showing that? I'm looking at a different version that I sent over, right? That's what's going on here, probably.
Oh, we're looking at something different.
Okay, yeah, no,
And
that
it's,
was,
and they're on both of them, stage 1 and 2.
let me get there, because the version I was looking at the version I sent over. Oh, yeah, that's not
We just got to
correct.
take out that second
Yeah,
sentence?
no, the version that you have in your packet's not accurate. That's why I'm so confused. Okay, yeah. Yeah, everybody is. So
Okay.
I think the version you have is, yeah, it's the old version. It doesn't show the changes, that's why. Yeah, so, okay, so to go
Right.
back, we can insert the appropriate version, but the version that, for both stage 1 and stage 2, subsection 2 should read, outdoor smoking of any tobacco product or similar material in cigarettes, cigars, or pipes is prohibited. Discarding lighted cigarettes, cigars, or pipe tobacco products outdoors is also prohibited. That's how it should read. I think it's probably just the wrong version. There's probably some miscommunication, so.
Oh, and that word outdoors is important, otherwise you're never allowed to put your cigarette out.
Right, you can't, you have to just smoke it till it goes out.
Okay. Well, at the risk of muddying the waters, I'd like to make reference to a letter that we received from Fire Chief Fawcett that was in the council packets. And he expressed some concern after sleeping on this that it was going to present I think, a hardship for people who are smokers to come up with some sort of legitimate compliance with the law. And I think, and let me just read what he had suggested as a possibility. And actually, from Chief Forrest's letter, he says, to alleviate some stresses incurred by our community members, it may be better received to prohibit outdoor smoking in a manner similar to our neighbors. And he had provided information as to how it's done in El Paso, Pueblo County, and in several, Colorado Springs, City of Fountain, and so forth. For example, this ordinance might read, and this is his take on that section you were just reading a minute ago there, Mr. Parker. Outdoor smoking of tobacco products or similar material in cigarettes, cigars, or pipes is prohibited except in designated areas where a non-combustible container with a secured lid designed for the purpose of disposal of the smoking materials is provided. Discarding of lighted tobacco products or similar material in cigarettes, cigars, or pipes is prohibited. So that was the chief's thought in retrospect. So I was wondering how council thought about that. I think maybe that's something we should entertain. I think it makes compliance more doable. And I think if we make it, if we come up with a situation where it's hard for people to comply, they're going to sneak off into the weeds and smoke there, and that's probably going to be more dangerous than if we have, if we allow businesses to provide a designated smoking area. And the
Well,
area
and
could be approved by the fire department. I'm sorry, Julie?
I'm sorry.
Well, that's okay.
Because that just triggered, I was thinking, and Jeff might know, I think state laws that you can't have smoking within 500 feet of a business. Or 400 feet. There's a certain
Well,
distance
yeah,
because it's disgusting when, I had this at my office building. Everybody would put their cigarette out right at the front door.
Yeah, I
And,
think
and it wouldn't really be out, and it would still be smoking, and it's come into everybody's windows. And
yeah, I think it's 15 feet of an entrance to a building.
Oh,
I
is that
think.
all?
Yeah.
Oh, that's nothing.
Yeah.
So it would be right on the sidewalk.
It could be okay if you're with outside that area from the entrance. So.
Oh, I would hate to see all these smoking places right outside the businesses.
Well, that's a concern. That's why we're talking about it now. The question is, do we want to give people a way to, they're not going to change their behavior, extensively, I think, but do we make it easy for them to comply with some sort of safe protocol? And if really our goal is to not burn the town down and to prevent fires, I think that's what we need to keep in mind.
What if we authorize it like at the skate park where everything's all concrete? Tell them to go to the skate park and smoke with the teenagers.
Well, it's a park, so that's not allowed in the park.
We could make an exception during stage 1.
Okay. We've got Deputy Chief Buckmiller here. Keith, we were talking a bit about, of course, the fire ordinance, and just most recently, the letter, I think you're probably familiar with it, the Chief Forsyth had provided, and he had suggested amending the ordinance to allow smoking in designated areas. I believe you're somewhat familiar with that. Yeah, could you speak to that?
Yes, I am. I can take it back to yesterday. Yesterday was one of our events that we have high suspicion was a cigarette that was discarded improperly. Now, that was discarded off 30 feet worth of asphalt, but it was discarded over into the area where we had vegetation, which was able to be bellowed up and caught on fire. I think that in the ordinance, we're looking for covering for the cigarettes so that they have a place where they go where they can't blow up and they can't blow out. And the area that we want to have is, I think that we identified the 15 feet, it was because we want to be able to capture that cigarette as it rolls when the wind starts to push it. And that's where we're kind of identifying an area that kind of gives us somewhat of a defendable space where that cigarette will not get into a place where it's got kindling and where it forms up like a kindling, starts to create a bigger event. Does that answer?
Okay, Julie?
I have an idea. So what if we decide that the designated smoking area during the high fire, during these various stages, will be right in front of the fire department? You won't have far to go, and then and it's just one big driveway.
I think that's a rhetorical question.
Just food for thought.
Yeah,
I like that better than on these tiny little
Yeah,
sidewalks up and down.
Yeah, I think we want to solve problems. Good. Well, no, it would. I mean, if it was actionable. We get Judith and then Michelle. Judith?
Thank you. So, I read Chief Forsyth's letter, and I appreciate what other communities are trying to do. These other communities aren't at the very base of Pike's Peak, but appreciated his information that he gave us. Also probably not enforceable either for discussion purposes. But, I want to take a leadership role. I want Manitou to be a leader and not a follower, and looking at what all of our other cities are doing and decide how we, make people feel better, So if you are a pot smoker, you can't smoke your joint on Manitou Avenue. You've got to do that in your house. And if you happen to be an alcoholic, you can't take your martini out on Manitou Avenue either. You got to drink alcohol somewhere else. And so, but cigarette smoking for some reason, tobacco, because it's so addictive, we feel like we need to make some kind of, exception for that. So I want to be a leader and say, we need to ban, we're not saying banning this on every day of the week. We're saying we're in a stage 1 or stage 2 fire ban. That's totally different, and I think it's highly appropriate for us to go ahead and ban cigarette or tobacco products in our community, given that I had the opportunity to take a look at some of that footage of that fire yesterday and saw that cigarette butt. And it's my understanding a postmortem has not been done. And thank you to the phenomenal firefighters. I hear there were 20 from your department that responded to put out that fire. If that fire would have taken off, we would have been in a hell of a lot of trouble. And I'm not willing to sign up for that. I think we need to just, do our best in enforcing it, not knowing that we can't enforce it 100%, but I stand behind the ordinance as we amended it on Tuesday.
Okay, Michelle, you had comments?
I'm not a smoker, but I do understand the addiction to tobacco products. And so looking at the non-combustible containers, have you guys thought of any ideas of where you would put those, like Hiawatha, Wichita, Canyon parking lot?
We're going to have them where they're convenient and accessible to the smokers, because I can tell you that 9 out of 10 times that when I watch a person discard a cigarette, it looks like this, and it goes where it wants to go. So if we don't make it available to them, that cigarette's going to be on the ground.
Because my understanding is, like, if you're looking at the townhouse or Mate or anywhere near there, with all of our pavers and flowers and trees and anything, we're going to go up in flames.
We're trying to present to you a problem and a potential problem that could get us behind the 8 ball really rapidly. And that's why we identified the stage 1, the stage 2. And with both those stages, we have significant natural barriers and natural benefits. Stage 1, we're walking a tightrope. Stage 2, we're tipping. And so we want to be able to control that as best we can and have it so that it can be progressively enforced so that we can not have that problem. If we have lots of area, the 15 feet, I think that's a pretty good barrier that gives us some pretty good defendable space that cigarette's not going to have a fuel source or another fuel to continue, a fuel continuum. And in doing so, most our bars have got lots of sidewalk and there's not a lot of vegetation. But where there's planters, there's going to be discarded cigarettes. If we don't put a containment in that area for them to be able to manage their cigarettes properly, then they're going to be careless, or they're going to see what they've been doing habitually, and their muscle memory is going to say, flick the cigarette.
Then for me, I will go with outdoor smoking of tobacco products or similar material in cigarettes, cigars, or pipes is prohibited, stage 1 and stage 2.
Okay.
Is prohibited outside.
Yeah. I see our police chief is also here. Bill, could you come forward? I think it might be appropriate, since I like to think of emergency services as a team approach, fire and police together. I think it might be helpful for us to think through these two scenarios and how the public behaves and how we can get the greatest degree of compliance and hopefully the greatest degree of safety. Bill, do you have thoughts on this?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. I've heard everybody talking tonight, and I have reviewed a lot of this material, all of it, that's been made available to me. I cannot see how this can be strictly enforced. I think we have to take a reasonable approach to this and make some kind of concession. I think the deputy fire chief said it best. If we come up with an approved structure with some kind of container, non-combustible with a lid, I think is what it was. I think that's doable. We're not going to get people to quit smoking because there's a stage 1 or stage 2 fire ban.
Okay. So Chief, I guess in reference then, with Chief Forrest's letter, the clause that he put in there, do you support that? Does that seem to be a better approach to you, or how do you see that?
To me, it does. It seems reasonable and fair.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Council, this would be a good time if we have questions for Chief Otto. Okay. Guess not. Well, Council, it's okay. I guess we could go around the table and see where we stand. I think, Michelle, you're against smoking at both stage 1 and stage 2, or condition, okay. And Judith, I think you're the same way. Nancy?
Yeah, I just want to say that normally I agree that I'd like to be a leader on this, but, you know, already El Paso County and City of Fountain have had no outdoor smoking at all. So to me, that the precedent is strongly set. I think I made it no secret that fire terrifies me, and I do understand the argument that perhaps we would be pushing people to places where it might make it worse. But I think, you know, everyone is expected to sacrifice in a little bit or a lot, as the case might be. I mean, I've cut down trees to mitigate around my house. So I say particularly in phase 2, no outdoor smoking.
Okay. Michelle, I see your hand, but I want to continue around the table here. Mr. Shada?
Well, I would certainly be open to somebody crafting some language that talks about the use of these cigarette things that we have up and down the avenue. I don't find them to be the most attractive things, but it would seem like to me that if we came up with some kind of thing that said that you can smoke within, you know, 10 feet of those things or whatever, that would be reasonable. But I don't know that just anywhere up and down the avenue makes sense to me.
Okay. Thank you. Natalie?
I support the recommendation of the police chief and the fire chief with the designated areas.
Okay, thank you. Julie?
Well, I'm somewhat torn about this because while as much as I'd love to prohibit the outdoor smoking during these phases, it's kind of like the abortion issue to me. People are going to have abortions whether it's legal or not. People are going to be smoking cigarettes when they're at the bar, whether it's legal or not. And if it's too far for them to walk back to their car to have a smoke there, they'll be smoking outside. So then it makes me think, okay, that would be more dangerous for them to smoke with no container to put the cigarette in and just flick it. So then I'm thinking, okay, I really can't, as much as I dislike walking on a narrow sidewalk with cigarette smoke on it, I can't really envision the appropriate place where we would be 15 feet from each doorway to each commercial building on the avenue. And that's where I come back to, okay, maybe the outlying, you know, maybe down by the police station and the fire station, or maybe further west. If people are going to be smoking anyway, and we can't put it near the bars, that's where we're going to need it, then I'm not sure it works to have these these special containers for the cigarettes. I'd like to find a place to put them, if we could, that was right downtown, just so that the people who want to comply with the law will bother to walk down to where the special ashtray thing is and use it. But I don't know where that would be.
Thank you. And I guess I would also support the suggestions of the fire and police chiefs. You know, I think back to when we had, in our recent experience, of course, we did the mask mandate in Manitou. We outlawed the incline. We never got 100% compliance. Actually, on the incline, the numbers were reduced to something like 5%. So a majority of people got the message and complied, and we really spent very little in terms of our police resources and money on enforcing the incline. We appealed to, I think, people's better behavior and got, for the most part, pretty good compliance. And we had a few renegades, and we always seem to have some renegades. That's why we have police to mop that part up. But by and large, I think if we can have requirements that people can reasonably adhere to and still give us a reasonable measure of safety, I think that's a better choice. I think Councilor Wolf made a good point that outlawing abortions didn't stop abortions, it just made them illegal. And that's probably, there's a real downside to things like that. So I would support the proposal that Chief Forsyth had stated. Might be attempted to add a clause that the designated smoking area be approved by the fire chief or his designated representative. That just gives us a little bit more authority, a little more control. I saw a couple hands over there. Judith?
So I do understand the discussion. I'm conflicted too, because I actually think that if we're going to put these containers downtown, if there's a planter and a container, I give that 50-50 odds, maybe, that cigarette's going to go into that fireproof container. It's going to go into the planter or on the street. Or people are still going to flick them out of their cars. However, if the feeling is that these are really going to make a difference, I want to know where they're going to be. I mean, before I make a decision, I don't, you know, I want to have a clear understanding of exactly where are they going to go. So have you, I know the letter outlines what you want to do. Did you get as far as to talking about where that designated area would be and where these containers would go?
That piece of the puzzle has not been identified yet. It can be, and we can have input from all y'all to see what your thoughts were for distances, for the types of businesses. I think some would be more prone, like the bars, to have cigarettes and have a lot more of them than with the ice cream shop. But that can be done with a walk through town, and we can give you some specifics about how far away they need to be, how long it's going to take somebody to get from one cigarette to the next cigarette, and kind of line it out that way or kind of distance it out that way.
Thank you. Michelle? Sorry, I didn't mean to overlook you. Oh, you got your question answered, okay.
Well, Mayor, I have a question.
Yeah,
Would it
go
be
ahead, Julie.
acceptable to you if we table this for 2 weeks so that we can ask the fire department to coordinate with the police and come back and tell us the locations that would meet state law and still satisfy the need to put these near the bars, and then we could decide if we're comfortable with the language allowing for some amount of smoking in the downtown area?
You know, I think that's a really good idea. That would give the police, yeah.
Then we know what we're voting on. It makes it easier for us to know, like Judith was saying, exactly what the proposal is.
Okay. Council like to discuss that, or would you like to make a motion to that effect, or?
Yes, I'll make a motion that we table this for 2 weeks.
Okay, and would you like to put some contingencies on that?
And that we table this for 2 weeks, and that the fire department come back with proposals on where they would put these special cigarette butt containers that would comply with state law, and that would be in close proximity to the bars, or at least most of them, and then we can take it up on second reading at that time.
I second.
Seconded by Michelle. Okay, and Nancy has a question. Denise, if you could wait just a second here, we'll see what Nancy's question is.
I made a note, and I'm trying to find it in here. It seems like there was and I may have written it in the wrong place. So the violation, I thought that there was an identified amount. Do you know what that is for violating? How much what the fine would be? Or is it a court appearance? What's the penalty?
The regular
It's up to your general penalty provisions of your code, which
Okay.
could be up to a year in jail, which that never happens, but a $2,650 fine.
So it's up to the judge.
Yeah.
Up to the judge?
Okay.
If that could be outlined in a couple of weeks too, I'd just like to have a sense of what that looks like, because I'll forget.
Okay. All right. It's gonna be, and Denise, you had a comment.
Yeah, I just want to, if you table this, I want to talk about the time frame, which you may want to do it quicker than this. It would be the June, you would bring it back on the June 7th regular session, and then it would come on the June 28th. So it would not be implemented then until July sometime, because you have to wait 5 days, which is high fire season. Or you could do it on an emergency order at the June 7th and have everything done, and then it would be implemented immediately after. The other option is to approve, talk about that you are approving this with these stipulations, and then the second reading, do your final changes and go from there, so it stays on the June 7th agenda.
I'm sorry, this is the second reading.
This is the second reading. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
this
so
is
we,
second
Sorry.
reading.
so
then
that
it
means
goes
we
to-
could do it June 7th if we felt comfortable waiting that long. The other thing I would guess is we could schedule an emergency meeting or have a quickie on the 31st, even though we're supposed to have that night off. And we could do second reading then, and if that 1 week time period would give the fire department sufficient opportunity to come up with their recommendations, we could do it next Tuesday.
To me, actually, council, and I don't mean to throw a wrench into the works here, but next week, May 24th, I do have planned a special meeting followed by the work session. So what we'll do is at the beginning of that meeting, we've got well, this assumes we'll pass the ordinance for lease purchase tonight on first reading, but we need to get that cleaned up. We're on a deadline. So my thought was to have a special meeting so we could do the second reading of that ordinance. So while we're there's an opportunity next week to take this on second reading. That only gives police and fire a week, but.
But it's safer than waiting.
Yeah, it's safer than waiting, so we could actually get some traction on this by next week and still give the emergency people a week to come up with an idea, some ideas.
There are already restrictions for level 1 and level 2, so if people are, I don't know if waiting 2 weeks is problematic or not, because Chief Forset's not here. He'd have to have it in by tomorrow.
Well, it would be 3 weeks then, unless we come in on the 31st, right?
June 7th, right?
Yeah.
I'll just say
Denise?
the 31st, there's numerous staff members that will not be available because we have that as a no council meeting. So it may be council that shows up that night, and we'll see who else is available.
Right.
My point is that we were just tightening up level 1 and level 2 restrictions, not rewriting the entire ordinance. There already are restrictions in place.
Right. I think one of the problems, the crux of this is, are we going to put smokers in a situation where they're not going to be able to comply? So basically, all smokers become outlaws. Well,
No,
that's kind of a problem, and that means the police have to arrest everybody who's smoking? That's
not what I'm saying.
okay. I'm sorry.
This ordinance we're looking to change to no smoking. Some of us want to do that, but this ordinance already has level 1 and or the original ordinance that this is being changed from already has level 1 and level 2 restrictions in place. They're just not as tight. So it's not like we're going backwards. We're just not going forwards.
Okay.
I have a motion, if I might. I'd like to amend my motion.
It hasn't been seconded, so why don't you go ahead and.
I'd like to move that we schedule this for.
I'm sorry. Was seconded. My bad. Okay, go ahead, Julie.
Nonetheless, I'd like to retract my motion and amend it to say that I move to postpone this until next Tuesday, at which time we would then go forward with a second reading for the special meeting that is to begin the evening before the work session, and at that time be advised by fire department about where these receptacles could go. That's my
second that.
motion for next Tuesday.
Okay.
Mayor, can I make a quick comment? So,
Yeah, Mr. Parker, yeah.
just to point out, this is actually, like, this is the second reading, which has a public comment portion. If you tabled it, you could table it for public comment to your next, whatever meeting is tabled to. But you might want to see if there's anybody here who wanted to comment on it, who came here before you actually vote.
Oh, that's a good idea.
That was your city administrator pointing it out. I take
Okay,
no credit.
good point. Okay, well, so I think we have a second on that, but certainly it seems like it'd be a good idea to hear from the public. So if council is of no objections, we'll go ahead and take public comment on this. So Chief Otto, Deputy Chief Buckmiller, if you could just stay in the audience with us for a little bit, we appreciate it. Okay, is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak to this? Okay, Leslie? And Leslie, you're pretty familiar with the drill, so go ahead.
Leslie Lewis, Manitou Springs Chamber of Commerce, Visitors Bureau and Office of Economic Development, 354 Manitou Avenue. I was just going to ask, and again, with Chief Forset's recommendations, one of the considerations is employees who smoke. And if they now have a 15-minute break and their car is in an employee parking area, which can be 4 or 5 blocks away, they can't get there, have a cigarette, get back to work on time. So it'd be nice to have some of those designated areas closer for them. And then also guests from out of town who might be staying in a hotel that's in a no smoking room. So if they can smoke outside in the parking lot, it's certainly safer than trying to find a place down in the bushes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Leslie. Do we have anyone else who'd like to speak to this? If not, we will close the public comment. And we have a motion and a second on the floor. And Julie, could I ask you to restate that just for our own clarification?
I move to postpone this till next Tuesday night for a special meeting, at which time we will hear from the fire department with recommendations as to where they would be able to put receptacles. And then at that time, we can move forward with voting on second reading and decide at that time how we want it to be worded.
Okay. Council, any further discussion? Natalie?
I'm just assuming that we won't have those recommendations in our packet. Is it okay that we're introduced to those locations during the actual meeting?
If council has no objections, I guess it would be.
Many times, I'm sorry, Mayor.
Go ahead, Denise.
Many times that happens for council meetings, especially if you're giving it to us today. We're just not going to get everything done on time. So if you're okay with that, we'll just bring the presentation on Tuesday, give the recommendations, and then have you move forward. Judy, is that okay for a second reading, that we just state that we're going to talk about recommendations, but we don't have specific recommendations in the packet?
Well, my assumption is that won't actually change the ordinance. I mean, the ordinance could be updated to reflect the proper wording, but the locations wouldn't necessarily be in the ordinance.
Right, yeah, I mean, you'd still have the ordinance. Frankly, it'd probably be the version of the ordinance that initially went in the packet, because we haven't had any changes approved since then. And then if you want to make changes, you'll just basically have them made during the meeting.
Oh, and I think we would need changes because the original language said along Manitou Avenue, and that was awful vague.
Yeah, I think, well, you could give me direction to put some language in now for your next consideration. But until you actually change it, it would still be the initial language that was approved on first reading. And so I actually have a suggestion for how it might read, and then it would depend upon what locations end up getting selected. I could pull it up if you'd like. See here. So I'm thinking, and we can change this obviously, but it could say, the subsection 2 could say outdoor smoking of any tobacco product or similar material in cigarettes, cigars, or pipes is prohibited, except that smoking is prohibited within X number of feet of a city-approved disposal receptacle at city-approved locations.
Allowed, not prohibit, that last word prohibited would be allowed, you meant, but yeah. Except that it would be allowed.
Except that smoking is permitted within.
Or permitted.
Yeah, I thought, I might have mumbled that, sorry. Within X number of feet of a city-approved disposal receptacle at city-approved locations.
Right, or it could say as determined or by the fire department, or however that last clause would be. Yeah,
Right.
that sounds right.
Yeah, and I left it at city just because that could be any, you could delegate that to whoever you want. And it would be the fire department would make perfect sense. And then I think what we do is we change that second sentence to say discarding lighted cigarettes, cigars, or pipe tobacco products outdoors. I'd say, comma, other than in a city-approved receptacle, outdoors is prohibited.
Okay, that seems to me to be a good suggestion, a good option to put in front of us next week. Nancy, did you? Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you raised your hand. Any other discussion on that, council? Okay. Well,
I'll call the question, let's
okay,
vote.
let's go ahead and, yeah, I think we can go ahead and.
Or do we have
if
to
there's no
vote on
objection-
calling the question?
I think we can just go ahead. I think we can just vote, okay? So all in favor of the motion? Well, let's vote on the motion.
We have a 7-0 vote in favor.
Great, thank you all. So we'll revisit this next week. We ask the police and the fire personnel to give us some recommendations. Mr. Parker will provide us an option that we can consider next week, and we'll come back to it. So great, thank you all, appreciate it. Council, we have one more item under hearings. I don't know that would necessarily take very long. I was thinking maybe we should take a break, but if you'd like, we can go ahead and get the hearing done and be finished with that part of the meeting. Any objection? Okay, Becca's taking her seat. Let's go ahead and continue with the last of our 5 hearings for this evening. Okay, so this item is the second reading and public hearing of Ordinance 0722, an ordinance amending the annual budget for fiscal 2020. And we'll hear from Becca Davis, our finance director. Becca, you have the floor.
Good evening. First of all, I have to apologize for the memo not actually making it into the packet. I looked in there today and I just didn't see it. I assure you I did write a memo, but a glitch in the system is making it inaccessible and it's not printing. So I'll just give you a verbal presentation. And luckily, this is the 3rd time you have seen this amended budget. The first was at a work session on April 26th, and then the first reading was on May 3rd, and nothing has changed since that work session. It's the same. This means that the ending fund balance for the general fund is still forecasted to be $5,700,000. And I hope that you will forgive the lack of a memo in this case because there are no changes and this is your 3rd time. But I'm definitely willing to entertain any questions you might have. Oh, and
Counsel?
have you opened the public hearing?
Yeah, I guess I better do that. Okay, thank you. Well, let me just say, does council have any questions for Becca right now with the expectation that we'll bring her back? Okay, no, okay. Thanks, Becca. I will go ahead and open. You might want to just sit there for a second, Becca. Let me open this for public comment. If anyone wants to speak to this item on amended the budget, would like to speak to this, this is the time to do it. Going once, going twice, 3 times. Okay, public comment will be done. Okay, council, questions for Denise? Okay, Judith, excuse me.
A comment, and then I'll go ahead and move that we pass it. So it's okay with me that the memorandum wasn't in the packet because our packet was only 318 pages for tonight, so you are forgiven. And I would like to move that we approve on second reading Ordinance 0722, an ordinance amending the annual budget for fiscal year 2022.
Second.
It was seconded by Natalie. Any further discussion from council? Okay, if not, let's vote.
Seven to zero vote in favor.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Becca. We appreciate it. Sorry we didn't have interesting questions for you. Okay, we'll think some hard things next time. Okay, if there's no objection, let's take a break. Let's go till 10 of 8. Okay, thanks. 10 minutes of 8. It's not quite 15 minutes. Okay, thank you all. Okay, so now we are at item I-1 under business. This is the first reading of Ordinance 1422, an ordinance approving a lease purchase agreement with Clayton Holdings LLC and an escrow agreement with Clayton Holdings LLC and UMB Bank N.A. So we'll hear from our finance director, Becca.
Good evening again. So every year we do a lease purchase for the larger pieces of equipment that are in our 5-year capital improvement plan. And this year, for 2022, which was approved at the end of 2021, the lease purchase program contained a police patrol vehicle with all its outfitting. It's $57,200. 7 police body cameras. Normally they get radios, but they were good with radios for this year, and they said we really need to replace these body cameras. And it was about the same cost, so it was a good switch out. Then there was a public services Ford Ranger electric hybrid truck for $40,000. Public services utility vehicle for $18,960. And then from the Storm Drainage Enterprise Fund, and this one's for 10 years, the others were 5, a Freightliner sewer cleaner Vector truck for $453,610, and this is used to clean out the storm drains and culverts and things. So we've been using Clayton Holdings for the last several years for our lease purchases because they offer excellent interest rates. And what's even more important, they're willing for the city to have the vehicle titles only in the city's name without a lien holder on the title, which is basically a Tabor requirement. If you have a lien holder on the title, that implies debt. And of course, we can't take on what is called real debt without a vote by the citizens. The lease purchases are reappropriated on a yearly basis, and then not having any extra names on the titles indicates that it's not true debt. This year, the combined interest rate for this lease purchase is 3.407%, which is higher than what we've been getting for the last couple of years. But I do have to tell you that if I had waited another week to say, let's get this done, the interest rate would have gone up by 0.5% interest rate, because just like 3 days after I closed the deal with them, the Fed raised the rate by 0.5%. And if that had happened, if we went into that higher rate, it would have cost the city about $12,000 more when you add in the accumulated increase in the annual payments. And this rate is good through June 3rd. They only go out 30 days, which makes it difficult when you have to approve the lease purchases by ordinance, because of course the city only has normal, regular city council meetings on the 1st and 3rd Tuesdays of the month, and if it falls just the wrong way, you're outside of that 30-day and you've lost your interest rate. Which is why we're gonna, if it's approved tonight, we'll bring it back on next Tuesday for the second reading to ensure that we close before June 3rd. So is there any questions?
Questions, council? Yeah.
Mayor, I just
Denise?
want to make a statement that all of this was in the budget that you just approved. So you just approved the budget, which approved this action to take place.
Okay, thank you. Anything else from council? If not, perhaps someone would like to make a motion?
Thank you. I'll move that we approve on first reading ordinance 1422, an ordinance approving a lease purchase agreement with Clayton Holdings LLC and an escrow agreement with Clayton Holdings LLC and UMB Bank N.A.
Great, thank
The
you.
second reading next Tuesday.
Tuesday, great.
Second.
And seconded by Nancy, okay. Any further discussion, council? Okay, let's go ahead and proceed with the vote.
Seven to zero vote in favor.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So we'll revisit this next week and
Thank
try
you.
to, we'll try to get that interest rate. Thanks for checking on that. Yeah, hate to incur another 0.5% increase or something like that. Great, good job. Okay, next item, first reading of ordinance number 1322, an ordinance repealing and reenacting chapter 9.46 of Manitoba Springs Municipal Code concerning sitting, lying, and street performing. This is first reading. So we'll be hearing from our Public Information Officer, Alex Treefy, and Police Chief Bill Otto. And gentlemen, since you briefed us on this at last week's work session, if there have been any changes or additions, that's where we'd probably be most interested in hearing.
Yes, if you're all right with it, Mayor, I'd like to do a brief intro, go over one change that is in there, and then answer some clarifying questions that we've received, as well as share some constructive feedback we've received. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
All right, perfect. So just as a quick intro for what this is, I'd just like to state that Manitou Springs has a history of street performing, and it's an important activity for many to do and listen to in our community, and we value what it brings to our city's culture, and we believe that our code needs to reflect that. Currently, our code does not allow for street performing downtown, and we are looking to change that. So we're proposing an ordinance that allows for easy to understand rules for street performing in Manitou Springs, and this would be by creating designated locations in the downtown area for street performing. So this ordinance is basically the exact same as you all saw a week ago. There is just one slight legal change that we made. It's just very minor, and it was a removal of a line that stated you couldn't reserve a space, which contradicted a different line that stated a space must be reserved. And Councilor Fortune pointed that out, and we talked with Jeff Parker, and he agreed that we should just take that out. But virtually, the ordinance, the intention of it is exactly the same. I would like to share some constructive feedback that we have received regarding this. Just to be fully transparent. So some of the constructive feedback we received is to experiment with no reservations at all and not use the kiosks, but just make it on a first come, first served basis. Also to add 2 additional spots, making it 8 designated locations. To make some of the spots bigger than 4 feet to allow for multiple people to play at once, and also to move spot 1, which is the furthest northwest spot, approximately 20 feet over to the further to the northwest under the quote-unquote money tree. And also, I would just like to provide clarification to questions that we received the previous work session. So for the possibility of having a reservation system where you could reserve these in advance, we explored that through 2 of our softwares that we already had, Honk for our parking reservations, and Civic Rec, which we use for the pool and fitness center, among some recreational programs that we're introducing. There would be no way for us to use these systems to make reservations in advance and also have it coordinate and integrate with our parking kiosks. And I am weary of making this only possible for those with internet access. I'd prefer to keep it with the kiosks, is my opinion. Also, selling items out of the designated locations. Just like to make very clear, you could not sell items out of these locations. They're for street performers. To sell items on public property, you would need a permit from the city. Also, to clarify on amplified noise, it's not in this ordinance. It's part of the city's already in place noise ordinance, but amplified noise is not allowed in the downtown area. Are you referring to the proposed ordinance?
Yeah, because I'm aware of the sound, the noise ordinance, but I'm not aware that there's a prohibition against amplified music in the downtown area or in the city or anything like that. So can you tell me where I would find that prohibition against the amplified music?
I couldn't off the top of my head, no.
So I think it should be in here, just even if it's somewhere else, just so that if a street performer wants to know all the rules, he or she will see it when they pull this up.
So this may not be 100% what you are looking for, but under 946.050C5, it states, street performers may emit sound in connection with their performances, but are subject to all City of Manitou Springs laws and ordinances pertaining to sound in the downtown area. This includes City of Manitou Springs laws and ordinances regarding amplified noise in Manitou Springs.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
I guess then, are you suggesting that each one of these spots should be authorized to amplify their music?
No, let me clarify. I am just, having amplified noise in connection with street performing was brought up, and I just want to clarify that amplified noise is not allowed in the downtown area, and that includes, if council wishes to pass this, it still would not be allowed, even in these designated locations. And then another clarification that we got, or that I'd like to provide, is that this does not affect street performing on private property. You would, of course, need to ask the private property owner for permission. We were also asked, could you still play the music in parks? And yes, that is correct. Parks are a public open space, so they wouldn't be affected by that. Also, I just want to provide even further clarification on why this ordinance is presented as an amendment to the current sit-lie ordinance. So to make everything clear, the sit-lie ordinance is extremely important. And the only issue that we see with it is the restrictions it has on street performing, which is why this is proposed as an amendment to the sit-lie ordinance, giving these designated locations an exception to the rules that it already applies to. But the sit-lie ordinance is extremely important, and we definitely want to keep that. We just want an amendment which allows street performing for it. Does that make sense? Perfect. All right, with that, we can take questions if there are any.
I was just wondering if Chief Otto had any comments.
I think Alex, excuse me, Alex pretty much covered it all. I did meet with a few members of our community yesterday as well. They expressed the same things that Alex brought up. Make the 4-foot in diameter area bigger. They wanted more spots. That was about it. That was about it.
Okay, great, thank you. Council, Nancy.
Yeah, I had a few questions. First is, you said that, and I brought this up last week as well, but about parks versus parklets, because each of the mineral springs along Manitou Avenue is considered a parklet. So I don't know if it's adequately addressed or not.
So my understanding here, and anyone please jump in if they have a different understanding, but my understanding is that of it being a park and a parklet downtown, well, it almost is, I don't want to use the word arbitrary, but I'm gonna, because what matters is it being in public right-of-way. Okay. And so the public right-of-way basically encompasses the entire downtown area, but in a park, it doesn't. So really what matters is that when you are sitting and lying, you're not in the public right-of-way. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Secondly, you began your presentation tonight again with the value of our community, because this has been almost set up that it's a we-they thing, and I don't think that that was the intent at all. I think this council has expressed support for street performance and wants to ensure that it's okay to do. And last week, Counselor Johnson had asked if that value could be memorialized in a whereas, but I didn't see it. So I was wondering why not?
I'm in full support of adding that as a whereas. Since we were told to bring it back as written, that's what we did, besides that one minor legal change. But I'm in full support to add that as a whereas. I think it's a great idea.
Okay. Next is the locations that are on the map are, as we used to say, big hand, little map. It's very subjective. How will it be, how, little bitty dot, I don't see how you can identify, I know you're going to put markers out there, correct? But it doesn't say that in the ordinance. It just has the locations by little numbers on a little map. So how are people supposed to know that they're supposed to go where it's marked?
I think that's a great question. I would say that if someone wanted more information on this, we wouldn't make the ordinance the only place where you could get information. It would definitely be on our website, and we'd partner with the chamber to have it on theirs too, to where it would provide information on exactly what to do, where these locations are, things like that.
And is that adequate then for the police to enforce?
Yes.
Okay. Lastly, $499 fine, up to a $499 fine. I didn't see that last week. I am supportive of enforcement and fines appropriate, but that seems, again, very, very subjective. So I couldn't figure out how that would be applied, how anyone would know what they're going to get, how much they're going to get fined if they not in compliance with the ordinance.
To be perfectly honest, I don't know that it would be an automatic fine. Maybe Jeff could help me with this. An automatic fine of $499 if someone is cited.
No, yeah, so I mean.
Up to.
This goes back to my earlier question. Is it the same
Right.
answer?
So your code has, any violation of your code is generally subject to your general penalties.
Okay.
And general penalties can be criminal in nature, which is anything over $499, which would subject them to possible jail time, but that hardly ever happens in muni court. And the judge basically decides what's appropriate based on the circumstances of the case.
Okay, thank you. That explains it. I just saw
Great.
it. I was like, oh my goodness. I always forget that there's the other aspects of it. Thank you.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Other counselors? Julie?
I think Michelle was next.
Okay, Michelle and then Julie.
Thank you. So if we went with 8 locations, have you looked at where the other 2 locations would be?
We do, there were some preferred recommendations that the members of the public that we spoke with had. We'd still need to look into it. I will say that, for instance, on the 8-900 block where all these locations are, as I'm sure you've noticed, they're all on the northern side of Manitou Avenue. Reason being is that sidewalk is about 25 feet from a business front to the curb. On the south side of Manitou Avenue, it's 15. So we decided that the northern end was better suited for those spots. I think that it would be best to keep the spots in the central area so they're desirable. Some of the areas that we were asked to explore were sort of in front of the library on Manitou Avenue in that area. I think that that would work very well because the sidewalk is pretty wide there. And then in addition, we were asked to, I don't know the name of them, everyone just refers to them as the stairs. I'm sure we all know what we're talking about. Was by those beautiful steps that sort of go up in between. I can't remember the name of the shops there. We are still looking at to see if an area of that is public or private property. We're not 100% sure, but it may be viable. If council wants to see 2 more locations added to this, we would definitely be able to find 2 more spots. I mean, there is room to add 2 more spots for sure, if that's something council wants to see.
Thank you.
Thank you. Julie, I think you're next. Yeah.
Thanks. Even though there is another ordinance prohibiting amplified music, I think it would be helpful to have that right here, just so it's all in one place for any potential performer wanting to know what the rules are. The other thing I wanted to mention is I was approached by a performer this week who suggested that the Manitou performers are worried that there will be an influx of out-of-towners coming to perform and to make some money in these spots. And he wanted to know if Manitou would be open to possibly issuing some kind of a local little, laminated card that says you've been confirmed as a Manitou resident and that you are a performer. And that way, if you show up at one of these spots, and there's another person there who shows up at the same time, you're allowed to say, I've got the Manitou, I'm a local, I get to go. So he wanted to know if there could be some kind of preference put in place like that, because he anticipated all kinds of competition. He also suggested that it be best for the time slot to start at 10 a.m. and not 7 a.m. Went into a whole long explanation about basically he doesn't want performers to show up at 7 even though there's nobody to perform for, and that way when the public actually starts arriving around 10ish, you can say, okay, well, I was here first or something. I don't know. He'll be here, I would imagine, at the June meeting to further explain that. But is there any, I'm guessing it's okay, but Jeff, is there any prohibition against there was some other law we have where we give locals preference. Oh, it's that new event ordinance, that says locals get preference on which day they want to have their event in the park. And I guess that's legal, but is it legal to give preference to local performers in such a manner?
There are, local preferences can be legal. I just don't know the answer off the top of my head. It depends on how you frame it. I'd have to do the research, frankly. I do see some potential legal challenges, but I just don't know quickly enough to give you a perfect answer off the top of my head on that one.
And would there be any potential legal challenges as well in terms of this new ordinance we just passed, giving preferences to locals for events?
I guess I'd have to look at that as well. I don't recall the details of how we put that one together either. So, one of the issues I have with this is that it's a typical public forum, but this really doesn't involve free speech activities and the content of speech, so it may not be an issue. I just wouldn't want to say yes or no blanketly without taking a peek at it.
Okay, and I'm not asking you to do the research necessarily. I don't know if that's what council wants to spend their money on. I just wanted to mention that is an issue that was brought to my attention and maybe something we need to talk about.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I know we do have, you can't have like lower fees for local uses of local resources, rec centers, and that kind of thing. You could probably do it in a way that doesn't completely exclude other outside uses. Perhaps have a designated area for locals or designated time for locals where you still provide opportunities for outside. I'm thinking that would probably be more supportable than just something that would maybe allow locals to dominate entirely. It just depends on how you set it up. That's why I'm kind of giving you a wishy-washy answer here.
Alex, I don't know, it looked like maybe you had a response relative to this question.
It was in regard to the latter half of what Councilor Wolf stated, so I'd just like to address that. As we stated in the previous work session, we started this at the designated location starting at 7 a.m., but within the ordinance, it states that at the top of every odd-numbered hour, as well as if you've been there for 2 hours, you must rotate spots. So you couldn't show up at 7 a.m. and stay there until 11 when the tourists come, because you'll have to be rotating spots that whole time.
Okay, thank you. Other questions?
Not
Concerns?
so much,
Julie,
not so
again?
much a question, but it's just a comment. So if I show up at 7, but I didn't go to the kiosk, I don't want to. I'm gonna wait until there's people here. And when people start to show up, then someone else shows up and says, hey, I'm gonna play from 9 to 10. And then I rush over to the kiosk and say, no, I'm gonna go first. I mean, I just don't know how that's gonna work. And he was wondering how that would work because he didn't want there to be like street fights. And I said, I have no idea, but that might require some attention. I don't know.
You know, I was kind of thinking about that too. How do you, I mean, it looks like we've had street performers, and I haven't seen fist fights over locations. So I'm just wondering if they have, just as a group, they sort of negotiate this on their own. I mean, that's a little bit beyond the scope of tonight's discussion, I think, but it may be that city council is looking for more of a problem than actually exists. Yeah, I think maybe just an informal approach to see if people can work things out on their own that might be what's actually been going on. I don't have an answer, but I guess that'd be a question I'd like to hear more about. But I'm sorry, Bill, looks like you've got a comment.
Yes, sir. Just in reference to what you just said, the gentleman I spoke with yesterday, they weren't opposed to what's being proposed by the work Alex has done on it. They even brought up the fact that some self-policing is going to be involved with them. This will help them manage themselves, if that makes sense. They can get it figured out, hopefully with no intervention at all from my department or any other department in the city. They seem very open to policing themselves.
That's what we look for, adult behavior. I mean, that seems
Yes,
like a good
absolutely.
first approach. Yeah, good premise.
Mayor?
Okay. Sorry, yes, Judith.
I'm just bringing this up because I think there was 1 or 2 emails that council got with asking the question about extending the time from 2 hours to 3 hours per session. And I'm not opposed to that. I guess my question to you is, if a street performer or a group of performers is at a location and no one comes, in 2 hours, they can get another 2 hours. They can stay there for an additional 2 hours. Is that correct? I mean, they don't have to leave in 2 hours. They can keep performing if there's no one. But anyway, the 3 hours was something that was brought up, and I'm sure it'll come up next Tuesday, so I just wanted to put it out there.
If you give me a brief second, I want to double check that to make sure I'm giving you a right answer.
Okay. Meanwhile, Michelle, why don't you go ahead and make your comment or question?
My understanding is that after the 2 hours, they can have another 2 hours, but they will need to move to a different location. Isn't that?
Yeah, I just read it again. So that's correct. As it's written right now, if you are there for 2 hours and let's say all the other spots are empty, your 2 hours comes up, you would have to change spots. And my understanding of why, as I said earlier at the previous work session, the city, we sort of use the city of Las Vegas's ordinance as like a foundation for ours. And I believe the reason they had that in there was for that preferred spot. That way, there's always that rotation of it. So even if no one else is there, you still have to move in case someone does want that spot, is the idea behind it. In terms of going up to 3 hours, me personally, I don't see an issue with that at all. We don't know the magic formula for what the exact correct amount of time is, and I'm not sure there is one. We just thought that 2 hours sounded right. So if council thinks that 3 hours sounds better, I don't see an issue with that at all.
Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments?
And just for the record, I forgot to say it, but the person who approached me on this also suggested that, and gave a long explanation about why he thought 3 hours would work better. It gives them time to kind of pack up your belongings and get the heck out of the way in time for the next person. And he thought that 3 hours was better as well.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Any questions for Alex or Chief Otto? Okay, I guess not. Well, we've heard several suggestions here. It seems to me like there may be some interest in amending the ordinance, although this is just first reading. It could certainly wait till second reading, but I guess I'd like to get a sense of council's pleasure. Maybe somebody'd like to make a motion. Natalie?
I move to approve ordinance number 1322, an ordinance repealing and reenacting Chapter 9.46 of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code concerning sitting, lying, and street performing on first reading, and set a public hearing for June 7th at 6 p.m. With the proposed changes, the addition of Alex's whereas, the addition of 2 more spots, including the money tree, and I would like to propose that we go to a first-come, first-served system, and to launch, not even have a required rotation, and that we offer some larger spots for larger groups.
I second.
Okay. Judy, there were a number of modifications to that, and I think that might be a little difficult to figure out where that fits in the ordinance. Mr. Parker, perhaps you can offer the best opportunity here?
Yeah, I think what you should do is just direct me to work with staff to prepare an ordinance, making those revisions and bring it to you with some red lines for you to look at your next meeting.
If that's something we vote on.
Right,
If
I'm
you
just
vote
trying
on
to
it.
get some clarification. Okay, so we have a motion. I don't believe we had a second.
Yeah, you have a second.
So seconded by Michelle, okay, we do. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, let's go ahead and vote.
We have a 6-1 vote in favor. The one no vote is Councilor Wolf.
Right, thank you. Okay, so we have direction to the city attorney to work with staff to figure out those additional concerns stated by Councilor
So that
Johnson.
means no reservation system when you said first come, first serve, right? Just show up.
Right, first come, first serve, yeah. Okay, for members of the audience, so the next step in this is not law yet. It was passed on first reading. We always pass, an ordinance has to go through a second reading, so that'll be in 2 weeks. It'll be June the 7th. Okay, so actually we've got a 5th Tuesday. So June the 7th, that'll be second hearing. At that time, we will have a public comment. I think that a number of you have talked to members of council, and I know I'm going to be getting with some of the busker people, in the coming week or so. Anyway, just kind of give you an idea, that's how the process works, okay? So you're certainly welcome to be here on the 7th, and that's when you'll have a chance to make comments. Okay? Great, thanks. We appreciate you being here and listening. Cool. Great. Chief, Alex, thank you very much. Okay. Let's push on. Next item, determination of authority for imposing water restrictions on water usage by ordinance number 1622 and emergency ordinance amending section 13.28.030 of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code concerning restrictions on water usage. And I would also call your attention to the next item, which is determination of authority for imposing water restrictions either by resolution 1522 authorizing the city administrator to impose restrictions, or Resolution 1122, a resolution imposing restrictions on water based on reservoir conditions. So based on this next item, that'll sort of give us the direction for item 4. Okay. So Denise, are you presenting on
I'm
this?
presenting so
Okay.
Jeff could go home, and so, yes, I'm here, and then Ann is also in the audience if you have questions.
Okay.
This first one is, I spoke with Jeff regarding the resolution that we presented last weekend, or last week, feels like weekend, last week. And as we looked at the ordinance, he says in order to do that, you have to pass an ordinance first, saying that you would be able to give this delegation or allow someone else to make the decision, right, to designate them. So we did this as an emergency ordinance. It is not an emergency situation, but we are definitely in different situations than we've ever been with the water, with our water supply and calling and whether a water right is called out, et cetera, et cetera. So we're in a different era this year. So my recommendation is first to pass this emergency ordinance so that you always have that authority. You don't have to do it this year. You can choose to or not to, but it at least gives the authority for this to happen. Let's say another emergency happened of some type. There was a fire at the reservoir. That would be the worst case, right? We would need to make an immediate decision, and I could not do that, nor could anybody else, without calling a special meeting, which means 24 hours. Those type of things have to occur. So this just allows that flexibility based on the situation. You do not have to take it, but it allows it to be part of the ordinance. So my recommendation is to pass that, and then we'll talk about the resolution and how you would like to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Parker, would you like to make comments?
If you don't mind, I read this over again today, and I think I'd like to suggest adding a little language if you decide you want to approve the ordinance. If you look at section 1, it basically reads, it would be revised to read, at such time as the city council or the city administrator or city administrator's delegatee, if so authorized by city council via motion or resolution, finds and determines that a shortage exists in the supply of water for the use of the public, such as to require the restriction of water use. And it says the city council shall by resolution. I kind of want to also, if you decide you want to do this, I want to also add, or the city administrator by written order, because either one of you could do it if you did adopt this ordinance. It just didn't include the option for the city administrator to do that if you're approving her to do so. So that would be a language revision I'd suggest making if you decide to proceed with this.
Okay, thank you. Do you have other comments in regard to the ordinance? Okay.
No.
Good.
Oh, before Jeff leaves, I did have a question for him.
Go ahead, Julie. Yeah.
We had talked briefly last time about possibly adding a prohibition against commercial taps being approved during, I think it was level 3, and I don't see that in here. Is that because there was some legal issue, or was it just an oversight?
No, remember, you directed us to bring that back for pros and cons and not to include it at this time. So we are bringing it back for pros and cons. You asked if there were any in the pipeline at this point, and there are not. So that's where we are. We did not include it because that was not the direction we were given.
Okay. Council, other questions? Concerns? Okay, well, this is, I think we're going down a path here. Do we want to give the authority to the city administrator, and I think, given Mr. Parker's direction, it should be shared by council as well. Or do we want to just go with our criteria on the levels at the reservoir? Natalie?
Can I just make a motion?
Sure, go ahead.
I move that City Council adopt ordinance number 1622, an emergency ordinance amending section 13.28.030 of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code concerning restrictions on water usage with Jeff Parker's proposed changes and the addition of commercial taps.
I second.
Okay, seconded by Michelle. Council, any further discussion? Julie?
Just for clarification for the motion, when you said adding the commercial taps, you mean specifically to wherever it is, A4? Was that right? So we're on the same page?
I want to look over your shoulder and agree. You
Let's
just need
see.
to verify that.
I know it's one. I found it in one place. Here's no applications for residential water taps will be accepted. So that's where it's going?
Yep, so section
A4?
where it lists residential taps for stage 4 to include commercial and residential taps.
So that's 13.28.030A4. Is that
That is correct, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a
So that was
second?
just a point of clarification, is that
Yeah, I just
correct? Yeah.
wanted to
No,
see.
so that's not added to the motion, it's just clarification. Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Okay, let's go ahead and vote.
We have a 7-0 vote in favor.
Okay, great. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Parker.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm getting the tap restriction that you're looking for correct, because I wasn't here for your conversation on that previously. So A4 is talking about level 4 restrictions, and I'm just making sure I have this right here. To watering.
Jeff, the goal was that any time there is a prohibition against issuing a new residential water tap, that it also prohibit commercial, but I couldn't swear that that's the only place where it appears.
Okay, yeah, I do see it in A4 there, and so, yeah, it's actually also in A3. Just so at the very last sentence, I see it there too, which is for level 3 restrictions. No applications for residential taps will be accepted during a period of level 3 restricted water use.
Oh, so then we need to, I'd like to move that we start all over. Include that level 3 as well. Is that okay with you, Natalie?
You could just do a friendly amendment.
We already passed the motion. I mean,
But it's
so
already
it's
been
passed.
voted on, so we
Yeah.
have to start all over.
You can, I mean, if you want to add it, just make a motion to add that to the ordinance as well, and you can have a second and vote on that as well, and I'll just take
Okay.
care of that.
Nancy?
I'm sorry, I thought we weren't going to do that until we had the pros and cons, which we haven't received yet, is that correct?
Well, but that was the motion we just passed.
Not, that's,
You voted how you voted. For level 4. We missed level 3.
okay, I totally missed that in the motion, sorry.
I did too, yeah.
I'd like to move that we add the commercial restrictions also to the level 3 ban.
I'll second.
Motion, a second. Mr. Parker, it seems to me like, and Judy also, it seems to me like we
Well,
can do this, but I'll look for legal advice here.
So we're getting into like, I think the key here is that we want to make sure city council voted the way they thought they voted. It sounds like a couple of council members weren't really clear on what they were voting on. I don't think you should be locked into a vote when you didn't understand the motion and the second. So my suggestion would be to get the substance right, that we clarify what the actual motion was, and we just re-vote on the whole thing. So nobody's just getting a gotcha here for not understanding what the motion was.
That's a nice attack of common sense, that's good.
I try to avoid that at all costs. I'm a lawyer, and there's common sense doesn't come in very often, but I think that's a better way of dealing with it.
So does that mean we have to move to set aside the previous vote before, I mean, you think that
guess-
we'd need some kind of formal agreement on that?
I guess we could do it that way. Maybe a motion to basically, I don't even know what it would be under the parliamentary procedure, would be just to basically set aside the last vote and vote again, and then you could start again.
Okay, I move we set aside the last vote
So
with
we're
the
actually
intention of.
rescinding it then?
That
is
would
what
be,
we're
that's the
do-
great word.
that's
There you
the-
go.
what we're really
Yeah.
doing, okay.
Okay, so I'll move we rescind the ordinance we just passed.
I'll second.
Okay,
Since I was the one confused.
Okay, let's vote and we'll go back and try to do it right.
All right, I would like to make a motion.
We need to vote. So we're going to vote to rescind what we just did.
This is a motion to rescind the last vote. Seven to zero in favor.
Okay, great. Okay, so now we're back to square one. And Natalie, I think you wanted to make a motion.
I move that City Council move to adopt ordinance number 1622, an emergency ordinance amending section 13.28.030 of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code concerning restrictions on water usage with Jeff Parker's proposed changes. And I am comfortable waiting until we receive more information about the pros and cons before moving forward with adding commercial tap fees.
I suggest we be much more specific about Jeff's comments, changes, because he made changes about all kinds of things, including level 3, and I think you're just referring to the
initial,
the,
right. But it would
the
be great to
intro,
clarify.
giving delegation authority to the administrator or something.
Right, and I can just clarify, just so we're all perfectly clear here. Under the ordinance, you have section 1, which actually makes the revision to section 13.28.030. And I won't read the whole thing, but 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down, it says the city council shall, by resolution, or the city administrator shall, by written order, declare the existence of a water shortage. It just clarifies that if you give the city administrator the authority, then it'll be the city administrator making the order. And that was it.
Okay. Are we all reasonably clear on that? Okay, Julie?
Is this an opportunity for discussion?
Well, we haven't had a second yet.
Oh,
I second.
Michelle, okay, you second. Okay, so now we can discuss.
my suggestion is I'd like to hear the pros and cons so that we can not have to be voting on something that says we're not going to decide part of it yet because we haven't heard the pros and cons yet. I'd like to hear the pros and cons of adding the commercial tap prohibition, and then we could actually vote on the ordinance. I'm going to have to vote no if there's no prohibition against the commercial, new commercial taps being used, but maybe if we all can hear the pros and cons, then we could address the ordinance with informed consent, with information. So I think we should get the information first, and then we can vote. And that would be my preference.
Okay, thank you. Nancy?
Normally, I would agree with that because I don't like doing things twice. That can be done once. But in this case, because this is an emergency ordinance and it's either an emergency or it isn't, and if we wait another 2 weeks, it's not an emergency. I'm not even sure it's an emergency at this point, but maybe. Anyway, I'm sorry. So I am good with setting it now so that if there is a fire at the reservoir, we don't have to call a meeting of the council to make that change. And I'm fine with coming back next week or in 2 weeks with the pros and cons, and then we provide more guidance to change the ordinance again. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yes, thank you, Nancy. Judith?
So I'm willing to wait no greater than 2 weeks for the pros and cons. I don't know, see how difficult that is, but yeah, as just a gentle reminder, we're talking about stage 3 and 4 fire bans where we are restricting residential taps. So to me, I'm sorry, that's like a no-brainer. I think restricting only residential taps, but allowing commercial taps would only benefit the developer and be ruinous if we're in a stage 3 or 4 ban.
Okay, and to throw in my 2 cents, I would be willing now to restrict the commercial taps before hearing the data. And the reason on that, I think, is it seems to me like almost any commercial user is going to use at least as much water as a residence. If we don't have the water for a residence, I don't think we would, it really, as a practical matter, entertain the idea of cutting loose more water for a commercial operation. As a pragmatic thing, I doubt that my understanding is we don't have any commercial applications pending or likely to be pending. So if we have to go back and amend it, then we'd be taking out the word commercial. That would be if there was a strong case in the data later. But if we're going to do it once, I think we could do it tonight. We could go ahead and take out, we could put the commercial taps in there, prohibit them just like we do the residential. If we have to change it, we could, but it seems to me less likely that that would be the case.
Is that a proposed friendly amendment, John?
Yeah, I guess I would propose that as a friendly amendment. And Natalie?
I'm comfortable with that amendment, but I just wanted to say that that my concern, the reason the commercial thing I think is interesting is that you could take an existing property and condoize it and add taps to that, but not increase water usage. So that's why I just think that commercial is slightly different, but we are talking stage 4, so I'm not that concerned about that amendment. Stage 3 and stage 4. But I'm just saying that I think that's why that was probably left out. But
Okay. Okay, well, I would offer that as a friendly amendment.
I accept your friendly amendment.
I don't, wait, you gotta have a second.
Yeah, I would like the entire amendment, or the motion with the amendment read again, because I'm confused again.
Okay. Can you do that?
But just to confirm, John, you did want to make a friendly amendment?
Yeah, I would, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I would need to have that second, if you would be willing to accept that.
Yeah, so, and, yeah, I guess, Michelle, would you be willing to add?
Okay, you're good with that, Michelle? Okay, all right. So,
I move that City Council move to adopt ordinance number 1622, an emergency ordinance amending section 13.28.030 of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code with Jeff Parker's initial proposed changes and the addition of commercial taps to stage 3 and stage 4 water restrictions. And do you want me to list the sections, or are you comfortable with that?
That would be subsection 3 and subsection 4.
Thank you.
Second.
okay. We need Michelle to second that.
Second.
Okay, sorry, okay, so motion and second, okay. Any further discussion? And Mr. Parker, have we made you more confused, or do you think you're good now? Okay.
I've already got it written down. I'm almost done.
Okay, good.
Assuming you're going to approve it.
Okay. Any further discussion, council? Okay, let's go ahead and vote.
Okay, we have a 6-1 vote in favor with Councilor Fortune voting against.
Okay, thank you. Okay, great. Okay, so item I4, determination of authority for imposing water restrictions on water usage either by Resolution 1522, a resolution authorizing the city administrator or her designee to impose restrictions on water usage, or Resolution number 1122, a resolution imposing restrictions on water usage based on reservoir conditions. And I believe our previous action pretty much determines what we need to do here. So.
Yeah, this is up to council of how you would like to move forward. I do want to mention again that this is very unprecedented year. We're getting water right calls, we're getting things that we don't normally see. So, but the reservoir is still spilling. That's a positive at this point, but that can change quickly. So this is how you would like to move forward. I did mention in the comments or in the memo that there isn't always a meeting every 2 weeks this year during the summer due to the CML and other meetings that are taking place. So it would require a special meeting if every time we go into a restriction that you decide you want to do that. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that it just escaped me, so it will come back to me. I apologize. I will something else to add in just a moment, I'm sure. That in the email I sent to you, we are meeting weekly now to look at the water supply, where we are and what is happening. And I can definitely send council a quick email after each one of those meetings, just to give you an update of where we are with the water supply.
Okay, thank you. Judith?
So what is the likelihood of Colorado Springs Utilities pursuing that water right from 1861 on French Creek? Did I not hear that they were, can you speak to that?
Yeah, they did do a call. We are meeting with them tomorrow to have a discussion to see why they need it, what it is, and going from there. So we are meeting with them tomorrow. So I can't answer that right now. They have made the call, but we need to meet with them and see if there's a way we can work through this.
Thank you. Other councilor comments? Okay. Well, we talked a little bit about the strategy here at last week's work session. I'm pretty comfortable. I feel like we should designate this authority to the city administrator. I think with the proposal in the ordinance, the council still retains authority as well. I think Resolution 1522 is a workable approach, particularly in a situation that we're in now with water and fire conditions that change basically daily. So I would move that we adopt Resolution 1522.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion, council? Further discussion, questions? If not, let's vote.
A 6-1 vote in favor. Councilor Chandler voting no.
Thank you all. Next item, first reading of ordinance number 1122, an ordinance making continuous parking violations separate offenses. And we'll hear from Kevin Stevenson, our parking director.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Kevin Stevenson, Manitou Springs Mobility Parking Manager. What's being passed around now is a correction for the packet. It is an updated fee schedule. So what we're looking to do is an ordinance to amend our current parking citation ordinance, which currently allows for a citation every 24 hours, by amending ordinance 10.12 of the city code. This would be a separate and distinct violation that could be issued every 2 hours on a progressive fine scale. And that is what is being passed around now, which shows the areas that would be amended. For the fines, it would also do a change to the universal fee schedule of those fines. Specifically, the fines would be, that would change 1224 parentheses 6 on page 20 of the universal fee schedule from the 70, 100, 150 to the 35, 75, 105. Again, 1204 parentheses 9, which would go from the 35, 45, 55 to the 35, 75, 105. And also 10.12.010A metered parking from the 70, 100, 150 to the 35, 70, 105. It would also make some changes to the fee schedule for any fire lane or ADA parking violations. Specifically, it would be 1204 parentheses 2B within 15 feet of a hydrant. That's currently set at 100, 200, 300. The proposed fine for that would be 150, 250, 499. The next one would be 1204 parentheses B, 3 parentheses B, fire lane, would go from 100, 200, 300 to 150, 250, 499. And we have an ADA violation. That would follow the same fine schedule as the fire lanes, which is I am unable to locate it.
Mayor, may I make a comment?
Please.
I think I would like to just mention that tonight is not so much about the fees. It's great that the fees are here just to kind of let you look at it, but we can't adopt the fees until the ordinance has been adopted by a first and second reading. So the ordinance allows, and we talked about this before with council, and you asked us to come back with this, and we were planning to do it for a work session, but that work session, we postponed it due to an incident that happened here in this city. So the ordinance talks about being able to do, it is under here, and it's at the progressive parking or the progressive fees. And that's something that I believe Councilor Wolf brought up, is down in Colorado Springs, you may get, after your first offense, second offense, third offense, and our ordinance didn't allow that. So the first thing is to say, do you want to approve this ordinance? Then we'll bring the fees next reading, which will be a resolution. So I don't want to confuse the two. First of all, it's do you want this progressive ordinance fees, a progressive fee schedule put in place for someone who may get 2 or 3 tickets? That's what the question is for this one. So I wouldn't really look at the fee schedule tonight.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I think that did help us get back on track, Denise. Let me run back to the memo here and look at, I think, a few lines that I think might be helpful to get us refocused on the real problem. Currently, once a citation is issued, the violator cannot be cited for the same offense within 24 hours and allows the violation to continue. By amending section 10.12 of the city code, a separate and distinct violation can be issued every 2-hour period if the violation continues and constitutes a new violation with an escalating penalty. Should a 4th violation be issued, vehicle impoundment shall be the assessed penalty. So I guess that gets us back to the task at hand.
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Kevin, did you have anything else, or are you ready to entertain questions?
I'm ready to entertain questions.
Council? Time for questions. Julie?
Did I hear, Kevin, I thought you said there would only be 1 ticket issued for each 24-hour period, but then I thought the mayor explained, and I thought, oh, wait a minute, that's not what I wanted. But then what the mayor just said is what I did want. So the ordinance says what the mayor says, and you're just on a different page, or did I hear it wrong? Or?
I may have misspoke. Currently, the ordinance reads we can only cite for the same violation every 24 hours. The amendment would be every 2 hours.
And so if I've gone over my time and I get my first offense ticket, that's good for 2 hours. If I'm there past the 2 hours, then I pay the higher fine for second offense.
Correct.
So the second offense can be on the same day.
If this is passed, correct.
If this is passed. It just is a different aside, but is there, what? No, I won't ask you that now. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from council? Nancy?
Yeah, I'm totally confused. I get the cover sheet. I'm having difficulty understanding how the ordinance relates to what the mayor said from the cover sheet. And I was also wondering what the parking manager's rules and regulations are. It refers to them. What are they?
That is the RPP guidelines, which is the separate ordinance, which falls under the violations portion of the parking code for the RPP tickets that are issued.
Okay, so it just seems like instead of saying the parking manager's rules and regulations, you would list the ordinance there that it refers to?
Okay.
And again, I'm having real difficulty equating. I'm glad we've taken the fee schedule out of the mix for tonight, because that confuses me too. But if it's, where does it talk about 24 hours, that you can do multiple tickets within 24 hours in the ordinance? How is that? I mean, it's in the whereas. I don't know. I'm just challenged by this.
Yeah, Mr. Parker?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take a crack at that. So, the ordinance in the packet on page 225, and if you look at does it not work?
It's Council Bill number 25, because we're looking at a different packet.
Oh,
than you are.
okay, sorry. So, yeah, if you have the ordinance in front of you, it'll say section 1,
Yes,
section 10.1.
exactly, that's what I was looking at, the
Okay, so-
10.12.020 violation.
Right, and so in your general, this is basically changing the general violation provision of the existing regulations,
Right.
existing section, and the very last sentence says a separate and distinct offense shall be deemed to have been committed for each 2-hour period during which any violation of this chapter or of any rule or regulation promulgated thereunder shall continue. And that basically
okay.
changes like your general penalty provisions in your
No,
code.
I see it now, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's
I just
fine.
overlooked that.
Go ahead, Natalie.
I just have two questions. One, I'm just wondering how many of these like second and third tickets do you foresee us, having to give out? And then also, like, who are we targeting? Like, are we targeting staff that are working, that are trying to find a place to park? Or are we targeting tourists that think I'm just kind of curious as to who, I just don't want to accidentally hurt the wrong people with this. So that's kind of my question.
Right, and I understand the question. I'm trying to formulate the proper way to answer. We make every attempt to be non-discriminatory. If a permit is parked, obviously that permit has a separate set of rules which it would follow. However, that does not allow that permit to park in a fire lane, so that's where things like that would come into play. So if it's a downtown employee that you're referencing, employee trying to park, just trying to work, those permits do have conditions that do allow that vehicle to override any parking policy or ordinances in that area based on the permit. So this is more for our center lane violations. We do have some that go over that. Yellow curb, ADA is a big one, the fire lane's a big one. And unfortunately now, if we catch that violator in a paid parking space, that's basically an all-day parking pass. We cannot cite them again. So this will hopefully draw that turnover to open up that space and correct that behavior of not paying to park.
Because I thought it meant like in a regular parking spot, if you parked and didn't pay, that you would.
Right, that's covered
Okay.
in part of it, yes.
Okay, because that's where I'm concerned that we might be targeting staff as opposed to, that was my question. Not if you park in a fire lane, that's
Right,
a whole
and
different.
no, the downtown employee permits, if that's what you're referencing, those do override any parking rules or regulations.
Okay, Michelle?
Okay, in regards to the 2-hour period, so I'm going to use Hiawatha Garden as an example. So they pay for 2 hours, they're hiking on Bar Trail, they get injured or lost or who knows what, and they owe another 2 hours, but they didn't put it in on their app, they're going to be charged $35 if we approve this. And then they're in hours 3 and 4, and they are lost, and now we're charging them or fining them $75, an additional $75. Is that?
That's the intent of the ordinance, obviously excruciating circumstances, that's where our staff would be able to look at that, work on those, dismiss those tickets, or whatever the case may be on that.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from council? Okay, if not, would someone like to make a motion? Okay. Well, I will move adoption of ordinance 1122, an ordinance making continuous parking violations separate offenses.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Thank you. Further discussion? Nancy?
Would you like to change the parking manager's rules and regulations and instead insert what that actually means?
Oh, okay, okay, Nancy, where would You be wanting that inserted?
10.12.020, I don't know if this makes sense or not, but to me, I wouldn't, if I were reading this, well, as I read this, I had no idea what that was. And Kevin said that it's actually another ordinance as opposed to parking managers' rules and regulations. It's the third sentence of
Yeah,
that.
okay, I see it.
So Nancy, are you suggesting that we would just add some language to this ordinance referencing the other ordinance so people know where to find
Exactly,
it?
just instead of saying parking managers' rules and regulations, just cite the number of the other regulation, so that you can
Or
find it.
incorporate it by reference?
Yeah, exactly.
Are you offering that as a friendly amendment?
Yes.
I would accept that, yeah. So it would be the ordinance as published with the modification that under 10.12.020, in the first sentence, the parking manager's rules and regulations, we would add a reference for the benefit of anyone reading this. I would accept that. Julie, would you take that would you second that?
Yes, second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to do that. Any additional discussion? Okay, in that case, why don't we go ahead and vote?
We have a 6-1 vote in favor, the one no vote being Michelle Weatherholt.
All right, thank you. Okay, next item, first reading of ordinance number 1522, an ordinance amending chapter 18.91, mobility share and other micromobility businesses and operations. Kevin, I think you're on tap for that as well.
Yes, so as discussed at last week's work session, the micromobility ordinance did have some amendments to it that was included in the packet. Specifically, the amendments were to 18.91.04 micromobility share and micromobility pilot program with the addition of mobility and parking department and the traffic engineer under G, terms of operation 1 and 2. Also under 18.91.040H, adding the mobility and parking manager and traffic engineer, as well as recommendation of the Mobility and Parking Board, 18.91.070 geofencing, the removal of Section C, restricting the operation of e-bikes on certain roadways, and the addition of 18.91.9090 micromobility shared vehicle retrieval, the removal of termination of program participation, and insert a fine set as set forth by the fines and fees schedule.
Okay. And this is what we talked about last week at the work session. So
Correct.
it's consistent with the direction of that discussion.
Yes.
Okay. Council, time for questions? Julie?
This is maybe a Jeff Parker question, but it seems to me under the 1891-090 provision, well, two things. First, it says repeated failure to comply will result in a fine. That seems to mean you get one free pass. And then my question for Mr. Parker, because repeated sounds pretty vague to me in terms of something in a law. Does repeated automatically mean like more than one, like you get off free the first dog bite kind of thing? That's weird to me.
Yeah, that is a good point, and which section is that in? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to.
18.91.090. And it just says the very last sentence, repeated failure to comply will result in a fine. So I guess that means do it once for free and then maybe we'll nail you the second time, or maybe repeated means you have to do it twice before we're allowed to fine you. I don't like that. I mean, a fine is a fine, and they always exercise their discretion to let people off when they complain enough anyway.
Yeah, no, it's a great point.
But I think it's too vague as written.
Yeah, I'm just going to the bottom of the ordinance while we're looking at the whole thing. I think I would just stick with the violations provision at the end and 891.120, and just get rid of,
Just strike that whole
strike that whole
sentence.
sentence. I don't think it's necessary.
Okay.
It's a good point.
Additional comments? Nancy?
Question, when did the pilot start?
March of 2021,
And it was supposed to be for a year.
correct.
So does it need to be changed in here to extend it?
Yes, this was brought to our attention today. We would like to add the terms for extension of the pilot program based on management approval, if council so wishes.
Okay. Additional questions or comments? Okay, I guess I'd look for a motion here. So I think we have a sentiment to remove some superfluous language.
I'll take a stab at it. I move to approve on first reading ordinance 1522, subject to the change that we eliminate the very last sentence in, oh boy. Jeff, can you give me that citation
It
again?
was 1891.090.
18.91.090. Eliminate the last sentence of that section.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Chandler. Any further discussion? Okay, let's go ahead and vote.
We have a 7-0 vote in favor.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, council. Have a good evening.
You too.
Could I just say
Yeah,
one more
Nancy.
thing? And I'm fine with it the way it is, but it just seemed that it was set up as a pilot. The pilot ended 3 months ago, technically, according to this ordinance. And we have no plan to either evaluate the pilot to continue the program overall or to eliminate the program. So I'm just, it's just housekeeping, but it'd be nice sometime to clean that up as well.
Great, thank you. Okay, next item, first reading of ordinance number 1522, an ordinance amending chapter, excuse me. I didn't cross it off. Okay, resolution 1422, a resolution electing to opt the city out from participation in the state of Colorado Family and Medical Leave Insurance Program. And we've got Kelly from HR here for that.
Good evening, everyone. This is a repeat from a couple weeks ago. We wanted to bring this back to you. There were questions about the Family Medical Leave Insurance Act. And I wanted to open it up to see if we had answered all the questions with the information that we had provided. There was a question, if I want to refresh some memories, whether or not the city could opt in at any time, and that is annually. We can choose to opt in at the beginning of any fiscal year. Once we opt in, we are committed for a minimum of 3 years. That was one of the questions that was asked. The other question, we do have information that employees can opt in if they so choose without the employer opting in. There would be 2 ways we can handle that. The employer can take on that administrative burden and submit the payments for the employees, or the employees can do it on their own. If we were to opt in by any chance, then we would, if we were to opt out, I'm sorry, and the employees wanted to opt in, I would strongly recommend that we allow the employees to manage their own programs. Were there any other questions that we talked about last time?
I remember one that was asked about whether or not, if the city doesn't opt in and the employee does, whether there's different benefits for the employee, and the answer is no. They get the same benefits as if the city had opted in as well. Yeah.
Good, thank you, Mr. Parker. Judith?
Kelly, is there a tax issue versus having, the city, the employee take care of paying their own? Is that a pre-tax or an after-tax issue with regards to, like, if the employee, if benefits are taken out?
At this
how
time,
would
I
that
don't think
work?
there's been a determination whether you can take it post-tax or pre-tax.
I can help with that. if
Okay,
you'd like.
thank you.
Yeah, so I don't think there's a clear answer federally. State-wise, I don't think it doesn't make any difference if the employee does it or the city does it for the employee. It's not taxable. It's pre-tax. But the federal treatment is still up in the air.
If I could ask one more question, I had a process-oriented question, and that was after reviewing the items in our packet. One, the letter from Jeff Parker's office stating that the city's employees must be notified in writing prior to the vote and provided information regarding the vote process and the opportunity to submit comments through a public process to city council. Did the city follow that process?
We did, and we did talk about that at the last meeting, that we did send out a notice to employees, and that we asked for any type of comment or feedback to go to city clerk. And we did discuss the fact that no one had brought anything to city clerk at all.
So was there a time limit to which
It
they-
was, we
all of-
sent it out and they were given about 2 weeks, and the deadline was actually at 6 o'clock the night of the council meeting.
And was that in writing or emailed? How did that go out to all of the
It was
employees?
emailed to all employees.
Oh, it was emailed, okay. Okay. Thank you, that's all.
Yeah.
Thank you. Julie?
Thank you. I think the answer is here, but I'm not, I just wanted to confirm, Jeff. Would the cost to the employee who wants to opt in without the employer opting in, is that the same as the cost to the employee if the employer does opt in?
Yes.
It's the same?
Yeah.
So there is no logical reason for any employer to ever opt in? Do
Well,
I have that right?
I guess that would be not an unreasonable conclusion. Yeah, but the opt-out option only applies to governmental entities, employers. So private employers you're in. They have no option to opt out.
So if I'm a municipal employee, if I worked here, then I'd have to pay whatever it is, $50 a month out of my paycheck, and then the city would send in $100 a month, and I would get the same darn benefits as if I just sent in my own $50 a month. Is that right?
Yep, that's the way it works.
Wow. Last time you said, don't assume that the law is always logical, because I predicted otherwise.
Yeah, you
So
remember.
I guess my next question then is for Kelly. It seems like no logical reason for the municipality to opt in, since the employee still gets all the same benefits for the same price if they want to sign up. However, knowing what a hassle it is for people to interact with government entities, and it can be so annoying, and you're on hold for days and whatever, would it be, am I guessing correctly that if I'm an employee here, it would be a lot easier for me to just say, Kelly, I want to opt in, you figure out all the darn paperwork and tell me where to sign? Wouldn't that be easier for me as an employee than if I had to deal with this FMLI thing myself?
Well, I really can't answer that clearly. I can tell you that it would probably be easier for the employee, but we don't have any direction on how that works. We don't know if there's a website that people will have access to. We don't even know how the employers are supposed to turn this information in. So we know that there's an overseeing entity that will take this on, and they will be managing the program. There's no clear instruction on how that's going to work. I will tell you that as the organization, we would be liable for any errors made in any submissions, any calculation of deductions or any of that. So they are talking, I haven't seen anything in hard writing what the fines would be, but obviously there would be some repercussions if we did not submit the correct amounts. So I'm just not sure whether the benefit outweighs
I
the
see.
risk of the
Well,
city.
personally, I'm not too concerned about, I'm sure you'll figure out how to do everything you do. You can get sued if you do it wrong. So if we add one more little thing, that wouldn't stress me out too much. I mean, that's why you're paid the big bucks and you know what you're doing. And I'm sure you figure it out with a new system. I'm more interested, I'm not so worried about the city's liability if they screw something up. I'm just thinking if the city's going to take the easy way out here and not contribute anything financially, because why should they? It doesn't help the employee, so what the heck? I do want to help the employee a different way, by facilitating the process, by making sure they have someone who can help them navigate the quagmire of this yet-to-be-determined bureaucracy. So that was my only concern. I realize there's always that liability issue, but I'm not worried about it.
Okay, thank you. Judith?
I did have one more question that was, I think it was answered in the CML thing, but it was clear as mud to me. So you know how if the city were to opt in, we would start paying in January of 2023, but the benefits wouldn't be available until January of 2024. If an employee opts in on their own and they start, let's say in 2024, they say, I want to do this, what's the period of time that they wait until they can access those benefits? Is it a year? It's the same?
Jeff, do you have that answer? Because I didn't get that anywhere that it would, I think there is a year lag time to build up a bank, but I'm not, it doesn't, it's not real clear.
I want to say 180 days, but I'm not sure that is correct. It's definitely not the most straightforward law to get answers for, but I think the waiting period is 180 days, but I could be.
Okay, because I tried to look for that, but I couldn't figure it out myself.
Yeah, I mean, the notice period to opt out is 180 days before you have to, but I can get you an answer via email tomorrow, I'm sure, or even tonight while I'm looking at it.
Other comments, questions? If not, would someone like to make a motion?
I'll move that we pass resolution number 1422, a resolution electing to opt the city out from participation in the state of Colorado Family and Medical Leave Insurance Program.
I second.
Seconded by Michelle. Any further discussion? If not, let's vote.
We have a 6-1 vote in favor, and the one dissenting vote is Mayor Pro Tem Shada.
Thank you. Great. Kelly, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Then item 8, first reading of ordinance number 1222, an ordinance amending chapters 5.09 and 9.24 of the Manitou Springs Municipal Code concerning the residency requirement for marijuana businesses in possession of marijuana. And I believe these are in direct response to changes at the state law. So, Mr. Parker, if you could address that.
I'd be happy to do that. And so I had some notes here. I'm losing track of all my different notes. Yeah, so there's been a few changes in the state law since your last update for your marijuana ordinance. One of them was it changed what's illegal to possess from 1 to 2 ounces. It eliminated the residency requirement for managers and employees of a marijuana business from being Colorado residents. It's no longer a requirement. And it basically expressly allows dual operations, but we already knew it did. We just didn't have it in the statute. It does impose more limits on marijuana concentrates, but those aren't really regulated in your ordinance. So we went through your ordinance, and we basically only had to make really one revision, which was to take out the requirement that employees and managers be Colorado residents. So wanted to make sure your ordinance was, or your regulations were consistent with current state law, and that's really all that was required in the update.
Okay, great, thank you. So
You're welcome.
I guess is it fair to say that we really don't have much choice in this? We're dictated by the state.
Well, you could, I guess, if you wanted to. You have home rule authority. You can always prohibit marijuana businesses entirely. So I believe you have the authority to be more strict than state law. So if you wanted to keep the Colorado residency requirement for employees and for managers, I believe you have the authority to do so. It's sort of generally been our position, is that you have the authority to be more strict. I guess I'm not sure that's going to get you much out of it, because they are vetted by the state, and they get background checks, and they get certified themselves. But if you wanted to keep the requirement in, you could probably do so.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Council, questions? Questions for Mr. Parker? Okay, I think maybe this is fairly straightforward. Maybe we're ready to go right to a motion.
Yeah, I guess I should have also clarified, we also did address the 1 to 2 ounce issue in your ordinance as well.
Okay,
so.
right. Julie?
I move to approve Council Bill 2622.
Okay, I'll second.
Oh, I'm sorry, I should also say ordinance number 1222. I'm looking at the ordinance and not the agenda, but just to be clear, yeah,
Okay, and I'll second.
thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, let's go ahead and vote.
Seven to zero in favor.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Parker.
Thank you.
Okay, so receive or act on council correspondence. Does anybody have anything? Nancy?
Thanks. First, I'd like to thank the city for doing dumpster day last Saturday. I personally took out 5 huge garbage bags of dried pine needles out of my yard that I was able to put there to help reduce my fire risk. But it was very helpful to have that, so thanks. Secondly, I went to the meeting on the strategic planning for the pool last night. There were about 20 people there, and they had some very good discussion. They asked them, these were primarily users of the pool and my age group. And the 2 questions they worked on were, what are your unmet recreation needs in the city, and what is your vision for a recreation center, whatever, pool, et cetera. And I think they got some quite good input from that. Lastly, I know it's, if it wasn't apparent, I was very frustrated by the packet today, or today's packet. I know that it would help me immensely to have redlined ordinances, and I was going back and forth, and just, I think that contributed to my confusion on some of these things tonight. And also, and a couple people did do it, Becca explained why there wasn't a cover sheet, but she said, as did Hannah, what was changed and what wasn't changed. And I think in the cover sheet, when it says that, that's very helpful also from when we first discussed it, so I don't have to go back to minutes or, my notes from work sessions and so on. So as a 1 of 7, I would just ask that in the future we have redlined ordinances as a matter of practice, and cover sheets include what was changed if we've discussed it previously. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
May I respond?
Mr. Parker, yeah.
So there's a couple of ways we're talking about for red line ordinances. One of them would be changes from first to second reading, so you could see what's being changed between readings based on council direction. I think the other option would be to have a red line or black line ordinance showing what's being changed from your city code. So depending on how we draft these, it's maybe what we do in the future is give you like a black line version with strike through and additions, kind of like you see for state statutes where they have, we could do, I bold italics is what's added and then strike through is what's being changed. Unless we do like an entire repeal and reenact or a big ordinance, because then it just gets to be a big mess and really hard to review. But so we could show you red lines for second reading from first reading, and then we could show you, we could do like a black line version, which is showing changes from the original ordinance. That maybe a new sort of protocol will follow.
I know I would appreciate that, thank you.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful also. Okay, thank you. Anything else, Nancy? Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, Julie?
I have a question. Was the red jumpy thing with the Bronco thing in Soda Springs Park this weekend, was that a private party thing or was that a city event? What was that? Or was that illegal? Somebody just decided to put up some huge thing there all afternoon with no permit at all?
I don't know that. We can look and see. I don't know of a city event that was happening this weekend, but we can definitely reach out to Megan and see.
So yeah, so there was this huge, like those kid jumpy things that, those blow up trampoline thingies. It was one of those, and then it had this big Bronco thing in the middle of it, and then there were only a few people who used it over the course of quite a few hours, were rocked back and forth in this whiplash kind of way until they got thrown off. And I just thought, I know the grass is already dead, so, it just made me so unhappy to see this heavy thing sitting there on top of, making it impossible for any of the grass to continue. I don't know. Is it illegal to have that kind of thing in the park, I would assume, without a permit? Does anyone know?
I think that was part of the silent disco.
What?
Yeah. Saturday evening was the silent disco.
It wasn't at night. It was definitely not at night. It was during the day. It was in the afternoon.
Okay. I just think Jenna said something about a bucking bronco thing, right?
Yeah, it was a bucking bronco thing.
But I don't know for sure, but that's if we're trying to track a trail, that would be the next step, I think.
Huh. All right.
Perhaps staff could look into that and find out what happened and
I'd like us to think about, I know we just passed this ordinance with events, but I'd like us to think about what we're doing. There's no point in paying for all the sod, failing to water it all winter, presumably, having it be 85% dead, and then putting a big plastic thing on it for 5 hours with heavy Bronco thing on it. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, anything else, Julie?
No, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I guess not. Okay, let's go ahead and go to the city administrator's report.
Yeah, I'll address the sod in Soda Springs. It was put in place in September after phase 1 of the Soda Springs project. When they do that, they expect some winter weather and snow, and which did not happen. We do not have the capability to water grass with our water tank. It's just really for trees, doesn't have a pressure system. So it really, we count on the environment and the winter weather to help with that establishment when it was put down. We are checking on warranty, so it may be under warranty and we may be able to, there's a good chance it is based on talking to Skylar. So plans are to put new sod in. Currently, we're trying to figure out the best time to do that, again, being so dry. The irrigation system is functional. We can't use it in the wintertime, so because you'll have to try to winterize it again and again, and you just can't do that by blowing out the lines because of freezing. So there's a lot of challenges with sod, and we are actually going to be looking at if there's any different types of sod that may be more drought tolerant than the Kentucky bluegrass, for example. So we're looking at if there's alternatives, but we don't know if there's any great.
Do you happen to know, Roy, how does Colorado Springs water their brand-new sod during the winter? What do they use? Do they have a special truck or something?
Yeah, we can look into that. I'm not sure if they have a special truck, but I will tell you, Quail Lake, a couple years ago sodded, and theirs died as well over the winter because of a mild winter. So it's very difficult to water grass without an irrigation system in the wintertime, and you can't really get that going at all because you have to keep winterizing it in Colorado. You just don't know what's happened. This Friday they're talking snow, so we might all lose our sprinkler systems here in a few days. I don't know what's happening.
Well, it seems to me that if we're going to put sod down, it's reasonable to anticipate our winters will continue to be very dry. That's certainly the movement, and, you don't have to be an expert to know that. So rather than continuing to pay money to buy sod and to have it put down, maybe we should find out how we're going to water it, get that equipment in place, either buying it or leasing it or whatever, and then buy the sod and put it down. And then my other question is, so many of our trees die because they're not watered enough. The trees in Soda Springs Park aren't dead yet. How often are they being watered, and how often should they be watered given the current conditions with a tremendous amount of wind, which, as you know, is very drying? And then, other than the snow expected, hardly any rain whatsoever. Am I going to see those trees die next, or are we taking care of those properly?
Our focus is more on the trees. Grass is easier to establish than a tree that's 30 years old or 20 years old or 10 years old, or even the young ones at 5. So we are focusing our efforts of watering on trees over the winter, and we have a new arborist and the gardener, and they've been taking care of watering the trees. So even though there's some stress, because we still hope for Mother Nature to help us out, I do believe that they are on top of the tree watering, and I think generally the trees look pretty good to me. I did notice in Cannon Lot that a couple trees looking a little distressed, so I just told Skylar to get his guys out there and start making sure they're not being missed, and so they're on those. So we're all a group effort, and if anyone sees any problems or trees that look like they're suffering, let us know. There's a lot of them, but I do think they're doing a great job at focusing on trees, and secondary is going to be sod. And the thing is, in 2019, we had heavy snow. So we're not sure, we can't always predict the winters. I do agree, though, that the tendency now is milder winters, and maybe we just need to find a better strategy if we're going to put down sod and try to, so it doesn't have to be replanted. But it should be warranted, and so we should be okay if getting
And the irrigation system is turned on at Soda Springs Park at this time?
It's the last one turned off and the first one turned on every year.
And how often are those trees in Soda Springs Park getting water?
I don't have that exact number, but I can get that for you.
How often should it be getting water? Do you know that? Given that they're new trees?
I'm not going to tell you as a professional, but my trees in my yard, I'm watering them probably 2 times a week, 3 times a week, deep watering for the root structure. And that's keeping them alive. So.
Can we hear from Skylar to be assured that that's happening at Soda Springs Park and our parks as well? I just don't want us, what's the point of doing all that watering if it's going to die anyway, because you're not doing it enough? I just hate for us to always be a little short and taking a chance of all this waste.
Yeah.
It's a waste of money, aside from the...
I think with the new arborist that problem has been solved, but I will have Skylar send Denise that information, and maybe she can just send it out by email.
And then just lastly, I'm sorry I'm taking so much time. If we were to plant grass seed, would that be more likely to make it through the winter than sod? Is that somehow a better solution long-term?
Not necessarily. Grass seed also has to be kept wet to germinate, and so you'd have to water it a lot. And again, that's our struggle in the wintertime, the ability to water all our grasses. I would say it's not going to be any better. A better strategy would be consideration on a mild winter. They're better at predicting some of these things today than they were, a few years ago. So maybe we have to look at that. But you would have to wait then. One of the problems, of course, is it would have been a dirt patch all winter long. So the hope was it would get established. And all you do is need a few snowstorms, which we lacked, I think, all the way through December until we had something finally.
So are you suggesting, it sounds like, that rather than buying necessary equipment to water in the winter for our newly planted grass, that we just take a chance, let it die if we don't have those enough snowstorms, and just keep replanting it every year? Am I hearing you right?
I would say we have a better chance of it surviving. If you look at any past plantings anywhere, most of it survives. You just have to have a few snowstorms, a little bit of wetness over the winter months. It's pretty tough grass, but.
So that means, you don't think we need to buy equipment, you just wait?
We'll look into it. I think it's worth looking at what they have today that might be functional, but keep in mind, you do have to staff it. I mean, the water grass is gonna be heavy on staffing to try to do that on a regular basis, so.
Well, I think once the commitment is made to plant it, then there should be a commitment to keep it alive.
Well, we can just wait till the spring and do it in the spring when we're able to hook up the sprinkler system and try to consider that as the policy, because otherwise in the winter, you're truly hoping for Mother Nature to help us out. So the only thing you can do is wait till, we just started in late April, hooking up and really May 15th is what they say. You have to be really careful until May 15th to hook up all the sprinkler systems. So we would just be putting sod down now, because now we can water it. So we could always just say maybe we need to wait for sod planting until May 15th of every year, but that would leave the winter months bare. So,
And is there more sod ordered yet, or you don't even know?
well, we're talking with the company because it'll be a warranty item.
So you think the warranty says even if you don't water it all winter, we'll still pay you if it dies?
Oh, yeah, I think that they know that they planted it with the idea that it would survive the winter as well.
I see.
Okay, we still have 2 executive session
Oh,
items to
sorry,
cover too.
thank you.
Yeah, okay. Roy, did you have anything else?
Just 2 more things. The rear diagonal parking pilot's working well. I'm getting mostly positive comments. Only negative comments are when people are afraid to do it and they don't want to do it, so they just don't like it. But otherwise, I'm getting positive comments on the rear diagonal. And before the end of the month, we'll have a reservation system at Hiawatha. We're going to be piloting 10 spots for reservations and see how it goes. And if it works well, we may expand it, but we're going to see how it goes and how the system works. So I'll let you know.
Great, thanks, Roy. Denise?
I have very few things. I walked Kelly out. It was night, and so that's why I walked out, so that she did not walk out to her vehicle by herself. But I also wanted to just recognize, I think several of you did that today or tonight, but I wanted to recognize the fire department and how quickly they responded last night, and a great job at getting that under control very quickly. So I do want to recognize all the fire personnel and the volunteers that came to help. The other thing I wanted to mention is Thursday is the coffee with the city administrator. So that's at Adams Mountain Cafe this time. So that's Thursday at 7 a.m. And then I do want to mention, I don't think that this is probably the best year to lay any sod with our water conditions. Needing to water it the number of times that's required and the amount of water, I think we need to wait till next year unless if something changes based on the water conditions and where we are, just to ensure that we can make sure that we provide the water. And it's hard for us to say we're going to go into restrictions and then we as a city don't adhere to those restrictions.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask?
Oh, Nancy, go ahead.
Are the police having a thing this Thursday with Crystal Hills?
Oh, thanks, Nancy. Let me look that, but I do think you're correct on that. Let me look at my calendar real quick. So thank you. And then the other thing is, I appreciate your concerns with the agendas. Thank you. We are trying, you guys know that it was a lengthy agenda. You spent all the time. I have basically 5 hours, sometimes 3 hours to try to read through it and approve it. So it's my responsibility and I own that. So I will continue to try to make sure that it's better, so thank you for that. And yes, it is Thursday, Crystal Hills District here at Memorial Hall at 5 o'clock, yes. The other thing I do want to mention, if you ever have a question about an agenda item and you're not quite sure, feel free to call me before the meeting and I can help clarify, or I can get the answers to make sure we're ready for it in the evening.
Right. And I'll mention also that in putting the agendas together, it's not always easy. Yeah, I think as we move into the summer tourist season, we're seeing a little bit of this. Being a tourist town, we've had things like tonight a liquor license, we have the fire concerns, so there's a number of things that are urgent and we need to get addressed, or leasing item that had to be dealt with quickly. So hopefully we'll get some of this stuff knocked out. I'm hoping we can take that Tuesday after the 4th of July, July the 5th off, and the week that a number of us are going to be at the CML conference, so we won't have a council meeting that night. So we're suffering a little bit tonight to get ahead of the curve. That said, okay, I think we finished the city administrator's report. We have 2 executive sessions. I'd like to go ahead and read that, get a motion to move into executive session. We could take a short break, and then we'll come back for that. We have 2 items. The first, an executive session to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, develop a strategy for negotiations, and instruct negotiators pursuant to Section 5.1D of the Manitou Springs Home Rule Charter concerning the possible acquisition of property. And the second, an executive session to determine positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, develop a strategy for negotiations, and instruct negotiators pursuant to Section 5.1D of the City of Manitou Springs Home Rule Charter concerning the possible acquisition of James property near Volmer Road. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Do we have a motion and a second? All in favor say aye, or vote. You want to do a voice vote? All in favor, say aye. Okay, aye. Okay. I would suggest we take a 5-minute break and come back and get this stuff knocked out.
Mayor, for both of the executive sessions, I'm going to ask that Jeff Parker stays for them. And then Roy would like to stay also, so I would ask that both of them stay for the executive session.
Okay,